Here is something nobody told you. Here is the fact that didn't make it into the history books that covered the suffragette marches, the factory reforms, the rise of the modern city. Here is the detail that was left out of every single exhibit you've ever walked through, in every single museum that showed you mannequins dressed in Edwardian blouses and Gibson girl pompadours and long wool skirts brushing the floor. Every single woman in those exhibits was, at some point in her life, dealing with this problem, alone, in silence, without a single product designed specifically for her, without a single word she was allowed to use in polite company, without a bathroom she could reach in time, without a way to buy what she needed without dying of shame, without anyone, anywhere ever admitting that this was happening at all. We're going back to the early 20th century tonight, not to look at the glamour, not to admire the hats or the architecture or the new electric streetcars rattling down broad avenues. We're going back to live inside the thing that half the population of the industrializing world navigated every single month, alone, in secret, using torn-up rags and prayer and whatever improvised solution they could manage before the factory whistle blew, and they had to be standing at their station with clean hands and a neutral expression. Picture Chicago in 1919, a city of 2.5 million people crammed onto the southwestern shore of Lake Michigan. A city of smokestacks and stockyards and department stores with electric lights blazing in their windows. A city where women have just spent 4 years working in factories and offices and hospitals while the men were overseas and are now being told, politely but firmly, to go back to being decorative. A city where the 19th Amendment hasn't passed yet, so women still can't vote, can't own property in their own names in many states, can't open a bank account without a male co-signer, and absolutely under no circumstances cannot purchase the thing they need most at the moment they need it, without experiencing a level of social mortification that you would not wish on your worst enemy. A city where everything is modern and nothing is. I do these history episodes, and honestly, I genuinely cannot tell whether you listen to them because you find the history fascinating, or because something about a calm voice describing the absolute nightmare of daily life in the past makes your own anxieties feel manageable by comparison. Either way, get comfortable, pull that blanket up, here we go. Your eyes open before the alarm goes off. They're still dark behind the curtains, the particular dense grey-black of a Chicago November morning that hasn't decided yet whether to become daylight. For a half-second you're nowhere. Just a body in a bed, just warmth and the smell of the room around you, that specific combination of coal dust and hair pomade, and the faint ghost of the boiled cabbage from last night's supper 3 floors below. Then you know before you move. There's a feeling, a heaviness, a low cramping pressure across your lower back and abdomen, and you know, with the absolute certainty of someone who's been navigating this since she was 13 years old, exactly what is happening. Your period has started, and the first thought, before dread, before logistics, before anything else, is, what time is it? The mantel clock on the dresser across the room says 5:47. The factory whistle at the Hartman Textile Works on South Wabash blows at 7:15. Your boarding house is 9 blocks away. You have, in theory, enough time. In theory. You lie there for exactly 3 more seconds because 3 seconds is all you can afford, and then you sit up. The mattress springs creak beneath you. The woman in the bed across the room, your roommate Vera, doesn't stir. Vera sleeps like she's been hit over the head, a talent you have always envied with a depth that surprises you. You swing your legs over the side of the bed and sit on the edge. The The floorboards are cold through your wool socks. Cold in the specific way that Chicago floors are cold in November, which is a different quality of cold than the cold of the air in the room or the cold of the water you'll have to wash with. It goes through the sock, through the skin, straight into the bones of your feet, and your feet ache with it. The room smells of sleep and coal smoke and women. You share this room at Mrs. Kowalski's boarding house at 1447 South Halstead with Vera, who works the morning shift at the candy factory on West 43rd. The room is about 14 feet square. There is one window, 2 beds, 1 dresser, 1 washstand, 1 wooden chair. The wallpaper is a faded pattern of cabbage roses that has been faded so long it now exists in a dimension beyond fading, approaching some philosophical state of pure pinkness, entirely divorced from any actual colour. You stand up carefully. This is a thing you learn. The particular geometry of standing up in the first minutes of the first day, when you don't yet know how heavy it will be, how the cramps will behave, what your body has decided to do this month. You stand up carefully, the way you'd stand up on ice. You're fine. You're upright. Good start. What you need is in the bottom drawer of the dresser, wrapped in a piece of brown paper, and what is in that brown paper is 4 pieces of cloth. Old cloth. Soft cloth, cotton flannel that was once someone's underdrawers and has been cut up and hemmed and folded into rectangles about 8 inches long and 3 inches wide. 4 of them. You've been using this system since you were 13, taught by your mother in a 30-second conversation that covered exactly what was happening and exactly what to do about it and nothing else at all. No why, no how long, no what to expect, nothing beyond the purely mechanical. You pull out the brown paper, you unwrap it. 3, you count again. 3. The 4th one is where you used it last week and washed it and hung it to dry on the line in the back garden, and it rained on Thursday, and it wasn't dry, and you brought it in and draped it over the radiator in the hall, and you went to check it yesterday evening, and someone, you don't know who, someone at Mrs. Kowalski's had moved it. You'd looked. You hadn't found it. You'd told yourself you'd look again in the morning and then you'd fallen asleep, and now it is 5:47 in the morning, and you have 3 cloths, and you're at the beginning of what your body tells you, through the specific quality of this cramping, is going to be a heavy day. You stand there for a moment in the cold in your nightgown holding 3 pieces of folded flannel, and you do not panic. You cannot afford to panic. Panic costs time, and time is what you don't have. This is what you have. 3 cloths, 9 blocks, 1 hour and 28 minutes, and the entire apparatus of female existence in the year 1919, telling you to handle this quietly and not tell anyone and not be late for work. So, handle it. You pour water from the pitcher on the washstand into the basin. The water is cold, not slightly cool. Cold the way water is cold when it's been sitting in a ceramic pitcher in a room that drops to 50 degrees overnight. You catch your breath when you splash it on your face. A sharp, involuntary intake that you muffle with your hand so you don't wake Vera. You wash quickly. The soap is a thin bar of ivory soap, almost used down to nothing, and it makes a thin lather in the cold water. Your fingers are already stiff. You wash what needs washing, which is everything, and you do it fast, and you dry yourself with the small rough towel on the rail beside the washstand, and the towel is slightly damp because towels in boarding houses in Chicago in November are always slightly damp. They dry slowly and incompletely, and you use them anyway. You pin the first cloth into your undergarments. You've done this so many times that your hands know what to do without your brain's involvement. The safety pin goes here, and and you pull things into position and you test them, and you make a private calculation about how long this arrangement will hold and what your options are when it doesn't. 3 cloths. A shift that runs from 7:15 to 5:30. 10 hours and 15 minutes. Do the math. You pin the cloth in place and you get dressed. Your clothes are where you left them, folded on the wooden chair, because there's no room to be casual about folded clothes when you share a 14-foot room with another person. Dark wool skirt, the hem of which you've let down twice already, and which is starting to show the previous hemlines in a way you've tried to address with careful ironing. White shirtwaist, the collar of which you've turned twice. Long wool stockings, held up with garters just above the knee. Sturdy black shoes with a modest heel. The left one has a crack in the sole you've been meaning to have repaired for 6 weeks and haven't. Over all of this, your coat. Dark blue wool, 3 buttons missing, the 3rd button replaced with a safety pin you've been telling yourself, looks like a deliberate choice. You are dressed. You are functional. You can do this. You look in the small mirror above the washstand. 21 years old, 5 feet 4, brown hair pinned under a dark felt hat. Face unremarkable in the ways that serve you well in a city. The kind of face that doesn't attract attention, and doesn't need to, because attracting attention is not something a working girl in 1919 Chicago can afford to do on her way to a factory job. Your name is Eleanor Marsh. Everyone calls you Ellie. You arrived in Chicago from Xenia, Ohio. 14 months ago with $11.70, a reference letter from your minister, and absolutely no idea what you were doing. Back home, everyone said Chicago would either make you or break you. They said it like it was a warning, like you had a choice. You didn't have a choice. The front door of Mrs. Kowalski's boarding house opens onto South Halstead with a squeal that has been squealing since you arrived and will be squealing long after you leave. The morning hits you like a slap. Chicago November air is not simply cold. It comes off Lake Michigan carrying the cold of something much larger than itself, the cold of open water and distance and geological time, and when it hits you in the face at 6:05 in the morning on South Halstead, it carries also the smell of the stockyards 3 miles south, a smell that no Chicago morning ever entirely escapes, the deep animal smell of blood and rendered fat and something else beneath that. Something older and harder to name. Alive things becoming not alive things by the millions, and the residue of that transformation floating west on the lake wind across the whole of the city's south side. You pull your coat tighter and start walking. The streets are already moving. Chicago is a city that doesn't do mornings gently. The day shift workers are out, all of them moving in the same direction at the same pace. The particular purposeful fast walk of people who know exactly how far they are from where they need to be, and what will happen if they don't get there. Factory girls in coats like yours, some of them better, some of them worse. Men in overalls carrying their lunch pails. A milk cart horse standing patient and huge at the corner, while its driver stacks bottles on a stoop, breathing steam into the cold air. The first cramp hits you about 2 blocks in. Not a surprise, just information. Your body communicating the situation in the direct and non-negotiable way it has always communicated things. You walk through it. This is a thing that working women in 1919 do so constantly that it stops registering as a deliberate choice and becomes simply a mode of being. You walk through it. You stand through it. You operate a machine through it, or sell goods through it, or carry trays through it, or whatever your specific job requires, and you do all of this without mentioning it, without wincing visibly, without calling attention to yourself, because the alternative is not working, and not working is not an option. The cramp passes. Another will come. You know this. The L rattles overhead on its iron structure, showering sparks into the dark above you, and the noise of it swallows everything for 30 seconds, and then releases the world back to you, slightly rearranged. Vera had told you in the first week after you moved in where to buy the things you'd need at this boarding house, where to get coal for the brazier you weren't supposed to have in your room, where to get the cheapest bread that was still actually food, where the Chinese laundry on 38th was, and how much they charged per shirt. And, with a particular lowering of her voice and a look toward the closed door, which pharmacy on the south side would sell you the things you didn't want to ask for out loud. The pharmacy was run by a man named Mr. Greer, who had been selling to working women in this neighborhood for 20 years, and who had developed, through long practice, a system. You walked in. You went to the far counter, the one in the back, not the one near the window. You did not make eye contact with anyone. You placed a nickel on the counter. Mr. Greer would slide, without looking at you directly, a wrapped package from beneath the counter. The package contained approximately 6 yards of white cotton batting, folded and wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. No label, no description of contents, no words exchanged whatsoever beyond possibly the weather or a comment about the L being late again. 6 yards of cotton batting sold in increments that most women bought monthly was not menstrual material. It was never described as menstrual material. It was never marketed as menstrual material. It was cotton batting. Its applications were understood by everyone involved and spoken of by no one involved. This is the system. You've been part of this system for 14 months, and you still find it extraordinary, not in an outraged way, not any more, but in the way you might find extraordinary a very complicated piece of machinery that you've learned to operate. It runs, it works, after a fashion. The pieces interlock, and if you step back and look at it, really look at the entire apparatus, it is among the most intricate and comprehensive systems for organized collective silence that human civilization has ever produced. Half the human population experiencing the same biological event every single month for 40-odd years of their lives. And the combined social architecture of the Western world was pointed at precisely one goal, making sure that nobody ever had to hear about it. The Hartman Textile Works is a 6-story brick building with small windows and the particular institutional smell of all large buildings where a great deal of human labour happens in a confined space. Your department is on the 4th floor. You take the stairs like everyone else, because the freight elevator is for goods, not workers, and the supervisors have made this point several times in several ways. By the time you reach the 4th floor, you are warm. This is the only good thing about climbing 4 flights of stairs in a wool coat carrying a lunch pail. You are definitively warm. The 4th floor is the winding department. 28 women, yourself among them, stand at stations running from the north wall to the south wall, feeding thread from large bobbins onto smaller ones, monitoring for breaks, clearing tangles, maintaining the machines in running condition. The machines produce a sound level that makes conversation impossible, which is considered by management to be a feature rather than a problem. You cannot talk to the woman next to you. You cannot be distracted. You can only work. This is your world, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. The woman at the station to your left is Agnes Wojcik, 32, mother of 3, who commutes from Bridgeport every morning and back every evening, and still manages to arrive looking like she has made a considered sartorial choice, which she has. because Agnes understands instinctively what you're still learning, that how you look is the one variable in your working life over which you have meaningful control, and that control matters. The woman to your right is Dorothy Chen, 24, who came to Chicago from San Francisco 5 years ago, and who has the most efficient hands you have ever watched work. Hands that move with a precision that has nothing to do with speed and everything to do with economy of motion. Not a single gesture wasted, every action exactly as large as it needs to be and no larger. Between you, in your first weeks at Hartman, you learned everything you actually needed to know about this job. Not from management, not from the supervisor, a man named Kowalczyk, who is no relation to your landlady, and who walks the floor 3 times an hour and writes things in a small black notebook that he never shows to anyone. From Agnes and Dorothy, from the other women at their stations, from the network of women that exists inside every factory, every department store, every office, that transmits the actual operational knowledge of the place through glances and gestures and brief exchanges during the 30-minute lunch break and the 2 permitted bathroom breaks per shift. The bathroom breaks are 10 minutes each. 10 minutes is how long you have, twice a day, to handle everything. In the bathroom on the 4th floor there are 4 stalls, a row of sinks with cold water only, a single small window that doesn't open in winter, and a hook on the back of each stall door that is both a hook and a social institution. Because on the back of each hook you will often find, tucked behind a woman's coat or apron, a piece of what looks like nothing in particular. A folded cloth, a piece of cotton, something. Nothing official about this, nothing stated. Just the hook and what women leave there and what they take when they need it, and the absolute collective understanding that nobody saw anything. This is the 4th floor bathroom economy. You contribute to it when you have extra. You take from it when you're short. You never speak of it. You are always aware of it. This morning, because you know yourself and you know your body, and you know that 3 cloths and 10 hours are not adequate to each other, you do what you do. You stop in the bathroom on the way to your station before the morning whistle blows. You're not the only one. Agnes is there, at the sink, washing her hands with the efficiency of someone who has 14 minutes and will use 13 of them well. Dorothy is at the mirror, adjusting the pin that holds her hair. 2 other women are in the stalls. Nobody says anything. But Agnes, drying her hands, meets your eyes in the mirror, and something passes between you that has no words and needs none. And when she hangs her coat on the hook by the door, she leaves something on it, something folded and white. And when she walks out, she doesn't look back. You take it. You feel, in this moment, the particular gratitude that you have no word for, the specific kind that exists between women navigating this in the spaces the world has assigned them, which is to say the bathrooms, the corners, the 30-second whispered exchange, the hook on the back of the door. A gratitude that is also a kind of love, quiet and practical and never spoken aloud, because speaking it aloud would require naming the situation that gives rise to it, and you don't have words for that either, not ones you're allowed to use. The morning whistle blows. You're at your station. The machines start. Here is what happens in your body and your mind during an 8-hour shift at a textile machine during the first day of your period in the year 1919 in Chicago, Illinois. Your body sends information at irregular intervals. The information is cramp, pressure, heaviness, a specific low-grade nauseating ache in your lower back. Your mind processes this information and files it under later, handle later. This is not the category of problem we are currently solving. The category of problem you are currently solving is thread tension and bobbin rotation, and the particular rattle in machine 14 that Agnes says means the bottom gear is slightly off track and needs to be reported to Kowalczyk before it becomes a larger issue. You monitor, you watch, you move your hands in the practiced patterns that have become, after 14 months, as automatic as breathing. Every 45 minutes to an hour, your awareness shifts back to your body and you make a calculation. You adjust your position slightly, you straighten, you take a breath, you keep going. This is the art of it. Not ignoring the information your body is sending, but fitting it into a schedule that was not designed with your body's requirements in mind. A schedule designed by men who did not have this requirement, for women who were expected to handle it invisibly. The first bathroom break is at 10 o'clock. You move through it quickly. The mechanical aspects, the practical management, the 30 seconds of assessment, the calculation. You can make it to the lunch break. You can make it. You wash your hands in the cold water. You look in the mirror. You look like yourself. Unremarkable. Functional. Present. You go back to your machine. This is how it works. This is how it works for Agnes, who has 3 children and 12 years in this factory, and a husband who comes home from the packing house smelling of blood and sawdust and asking what's for supper. This is how it works for Dorothy, who has never once, in the 5 years you've known her history of this place, from the stories she tells at lunch, missed a day of work for the reason you both know full well constitutes the majority of female sick days that are never categorized as such. This is how it works for all 28 of you on the 4th floor, and the 36 on the 2nd floor, and the 19 in the cutting room on the 3rd. This is how it works for every woman in every factory in Chicago, and New York, and Philadelphia, and Detroit, and Pittsburgh, for every shop girl in every department store, for every telephone operator, for every nurse and teacher and domestic servant and secretary, for every woman in every city in the United States of America, doing her job in silence, without a single commercially available product designed for this specific purpose, on the first day of November in the year 1919. There are roughly 37 million women of menstruating age in the United States at this moment, and there is effectively nothing specifically designed for them, nothing they can buy openly by name in a store without a process of mutual social fictioneering that treats the entire biological reality of female existence as something between an embarrassment and a shared hallucination. Let that number sit for a moment. 37 million people, each of them, monthly, navigating this with whatever they have, rags mostly, cloth, cut and hemmed or not hemmed, used and washed and dried and used again, for decades, for lifetimes, cotton batting, if you knew Mr. Greer or someone like Mr. Greer, newspaper in emergencies, moss, which sounds ancient but was still being used by rural women in parts of Appalachia in 1919, sphagnum moss specifically, which has natural absorbent properties that are genuinely impressive and which you absolutely could not purchase in a Chicago pharmacy under any circumstances, because the concept of purchasing anything for this purpose was itself beyond the boundary of what was possible to say out loud. This isn't the Middle Ages. This is 1919. There are automobiles. There is electric light. There is radio. There are airplanes. There are women who have crossed the Atlantic and climbed mountains and run for city council and testified before Congress. And yet the specific problem of menstrual management, experienced by roughly half the human population once a month for roughly 40 years of each of their lives, has been so thoroughly removed from the category of legitimate commercial opportunity that it essentially does not exist as a market. This did not happen by accident. It took work, sustained, determined, multi-generational social work, to ensure that half the population kept handling this in silence and improvisation and individual shame. The lunch whistle blows at 12:30. The machines slow and stop. The noise abates in the particular way that a factory floor's noise abates, not to silence but to a baseline hum that now, after 14 months, you process as silence because the contrast is sufficient. 28 women open their lunch pails. You eat at a small wooden table near the south windows with Agnes and Dorothy, and a woman named Ruthie Bauer, who works the station at the far end of the row, and who has the gift of saying exactly what everyone is thinking, in a voice that makes it sound obvious and harmless. Ruthie is from Milwaukee and is 23 and has opinions about everything. You find this restful in the way that listening to someone else speak with conviction can be restful when you yourself are too tired to have opinions. Lunch is 20 minutes. Your lunch is bread, the end of a loaf from 3 days ago, the cheese you've been rationing since Monday, and an apple that has gone slightly soft but is still sweet inside once you cut away the wrinkled skin with your pocket knife. "Did you hear about the Sears catalogue?" Ruthie says. Agnes doesn't look up from her sandwich. Which part? The new listings in the women's section, the back pages. There is a particular quality to this pause at the table, not silence exactly. More like a collective shift of attention that doesn't require movement. "What new listings?" Dorothy says. "Hygienic goods," Ruthie says, with the careful deployment of those two words that makes it clear she is deploying them in a specific direction. Listed by name, with descriptions. Agnes looks up now, because the Sears Roebuck catalogue is a serious matter in working women's lives in 1919. It is, for millions of women in cities and towns and farms across the country, the only place they can shop for certain things without having to hand them to a male clerk across a counter and perform the elaborate theatrical production of pretending to purchase something that doesn't exist. The catalogue comes in the mail. You look at it alone, or with women you trust. You write your order on the form. You send it with your money enclosed. What arrives in a plain brown package from a warehouse in Chicago is yours without ceremony, without witness, without the particular species of shame that a face-to-face purchase involves. The Sears catalogue has, for decades, quietly served as the distribution system for an enormous range of products that had no other practical means of reaching female consumers. It listed things, it described things, it used carefully constructed language that managed to be specific enough to be useful and vague enough to be undeniable. What kind of goods?" Agnes says. Ruthie leans in slightly. "There's a product from Kimberly-Clark, for hygienic purposes, listed under personal goods. It's a disposable napkin, made from that cotton material they used for bandages during the war." The table is very quiet. You have heard things. You have heard the way you hear things in this city, which is always sideways and never directly, that there might be something coming, that there was material being developed, that the nurses overseas had found something during the war. The nurses had been using a particular kind of cotton padding for wounds, a Kimberly-Clark product, and had discovered, as nurses are professionally positioned to discover, that it had other applications, effective applications, better than what they were currently using. You've heard this. But you've also heard the thing before that The Johnson & Johnson attempt, a product called Lister's Towels that appeared in 1896 and disappeared quickly, failed not because it didn't work, but because no one could bring themselves to buy it from a druggist who would know what it was for, failed under the sheer weight of collective embarrassment. "Does it have a name?" Dorothy asks. "Kotex," Ruthie says. She says it quietly. Not because she's embarrassed. Ruthie is not embarrassed. Ruthie is constitutionally incapable of being embarrassed in the way that some people are constitutionally incapable of staying up past 10. She says it quietly, because they are in a factory on the 4th floor of a building in Chicago in November of 1919, and the word she just said is, in the social grammar of this moment, approximately as speakable in a mixed or public setting as certain other words that describe physical realities and are not said in polite company. "How much?" you say. Ruthie tells you. You do arithmetic quickly. It's the arithmetic you've been doing in various forms for your entire working life. What things cost versus what you earn versus what is absolutely necessary versus what you can go without. You do it automatically, the way you regulate thread tension automatically, the way you calculate bathroom break intervals automatically. The math is not comfortable, but it's not impossible. "Where?" Agnes says. "Walgreens is supposed to carry it, starting next month." Walgreens, which means a drugstore, which means a counter, which means a clerk, who would be, not uncommonly, male. The three of you who are not Ruthie have the same thought at the same moment. You know you have it simultaneously because of the particular shape of the silence that follows, the way each of you is doing the same calculation, and the calculation is not about money this time. Ruthie, who never has this thought because Ruthie exists on a different social planet from the rest of you, says, "There's going to be a special display. You can just take one without asking. Leave the money in a basket." You look at her. You want to explain to her what she has just described, which is a solution so precisely calibrated to the specific horror of the situation that it could only have been designed by someone who understood the situation completely, which means it was almost certainly designed by a woman, because no man in 1919 has thought seriously enough about this problem to arrive at the basket solution. The basket. You leave your money in a basket. You take the box. You do not hand it to a clerk. You do not ask for it by name. You do not make eye contact with the pharmacist or his assistant or the man buying aspirins at the counter next to you. You leave the money in a basket and you take the box and you leave, and no one has to speak and no one has to see. And the entire transaction occurs inside the construct of polite mutual fiction that has been the operating premise of female commerce for as long as women have been buying things they needed to buy. The basket. The elegant, humiliating, absolutely practical basket. God, Agnes says, it contains everything. That single syllable. The relief and the fury and the tiredness and the 20 years Agnes has been doing this. And the thing she will not say, but you both know, which is that she should not have to be relieved about a basket. She should not have to be grateful for the engineering of a shopping experience that does not require her to be humiliated by the simple act of purchasing something she needs. She should not have to be, but she is. You all are. The whistle blows. Lunch is over. 20 minutes later, you're back at your machine and your hands are doing what your hands do, and your mind is doing what your mind does in this place, which is hold the thread of the work and also hold everything else. The calculation about the bathroom break, the low-grade ache in your lower back, the specific quality of attention required to catch a break in the thread before it becomes a larger problem, and the word Kotex, which is sitting in the back of your mind with a quality that you recognize as cautious hope, Cautious hope is the working woman's specific emotional register, not optimism, not certainty. Cautious hope, which acknowledges that things might be better while maintaining full awareness that things might also go wrong in 14 different ways, and that your job is to be ready for either outcome. The afternoon shift runs long. Kowalczyk is in a mood about production numbers, which means the floor stays hot and the pace doesn't let up, and when the 5:30 whistle finally blows, you feel it in your feet and your shoulders, and the particular muscles in your lower back that have been doing extra work all day. You file out with the other 27 women, down the stairs, through the lobby, out into the November evening air, which is colder now, 4 degrees colder than the morning. The wind has shifted, and it carries now a sharper edge off the lake that cuts through your coat like the coat isn't there. Your feet remember the 9 blocks home. You pass the Walgreens on South Wabash. You've passed it 1,000 times. You look at the window display, which is winter cold remedies and a pyramid of bromo seltzer tins and a poster for a cough syrup with the child's face on it. Nothing yet. Next month, Ruthie said. Starting next month. You keep walking. Mrs. Kowalski's boarding house has 8 residents at present. 5 women, 3 men, which is the legally permitted configuration under the city's rooming house regulations. A configuration that Mrs. Kowalski manages with the precision of a civil engineer and the vigilance of someone who has heard every possible version of I was just leaving and doesn't believe any of them. The women eat supper together in the back room, at the long table that can seat 8 if you don't mind the elbows. The men eat in shifts or out. Mrs. Kowalski doesn't care which, as long as the kitchen is hers between 6 and 7. Tonight it's boiled chicken and potatoes, and a dish of pickled beets that Mrs. Kowalski makes herself from a recipe that her mother brought from Krakow, and that she considers the finest achievement of her culinary career. The pickled beets are not bad. The chicken is what it is. The potatoes are good, dense and floury, the specific kind that actually fill you up rather than just suggesting fullness. You eat next to a woman named Frances Dalton, who is 38, and works as a telephone operator at the central switching office on Michigan Avenue. Frances is from Boston originally, and carries herself with the particular quiet confidence of someone who has decided that Chicago can try whatever it likes. She's been at Mrs. Kowalski's for 3 years, which makes her the senior resident, a fact that carries specific weight in the informal but very real hierarchy of a women's boarding house. Frances knows things. She reads. She subscribes to 2 magazines, Pictorial Review and the Ladies' Home Journal, and she saves them when she's done and stacks them on the hall table for anyone who wants them. And you always want them, not for the recipes or the housekeeping advice, but for the strange glimpses they give you of a version of female life that is simultaneously very close to yours and completely alien. Women in those magazines have houses, they have leisure time. They have the emotional bandwidth to be concerned about the arrangement of a parlour or the proper way to introduce a new neighbour. You do not have this bandwidth, but you read about it with genuine interest, the way you might read about life on another planet. Frances slides the bowl of pickled beets toward you without asking. She has observed over 14 months that you take more beets than you initially put on your plate, and so she provides them without ceremony. You hear about this Kotex business, you say. Frances sets down her fork. She looks at you directly. Frances has very direct eyes, grey-green, and when she uses them at full attention, you feel like you're being read. Where did you hear about it? She says. Ruthie Bauer. Of course, yes, I've read about it. She picks her fork back up. They've been trying to market it since the war. Kimberly-Clark had the Sell You Cotton contract for bandages. When the war ended, they had a lot of seller cotton and no more contract, and apparently someone with sense looked at the production capacity and thought, what else do we need a lot of highly absorbent cottonwood pulp fibre for? She says this with a flatness that is not sarcasm. It is something more accurate than sarcasm. Will it work, you say? Francis considers this. The material works. That's documented. The nurses used it and said so. The question is the distribution problem. She pauses. Whether they can get it into stores and get women to actually purchase it. You think about the basket. I heard about the basket, you say. Francis makes a sound that is not quite a laugh. Yes, I read about that too. In the trade journals of all places, Kimberly-Clark has apparently decided that the way to solve the problem of women being unable to ask for this product by name is to engineer a transaction that requires them not to ask. She says this with the same flatness. It should work, you say? It should work, Francis agrees. Whether it will is another question. You need the stores to agree to stock it first, and the stores are... She stops. The stores are also navigating the social situation. The social situation. You both understand what this means. The social situation is that the concept of a commercial product specifically designed for menstrual management is so far outside the boundary of what is publicly acknowledged to exist that even the stores in which it might be sold face a problem of display. Where do you put it? Between the aspirin and the bandages, in a locked case, behind a curtain, in a separate room that only women enter? Do you put a sign on it? And if you put a sign on it, what does the sign say? These questions are not hypothetical. They are in 1919 genuinely difficult problems for which the retail industry does not yet have solutions. They'll figure it out, you say. They have a financial incentive to figure it out, Francis says, which is the most reliable kind of incentive there is. You eat the pickled beets. They taste of vinegar and dill and something sweeter underneath, beaten sugar, and the specific labour of Francis's prediction, which you file away under cautious hope. After supper, in the back room where Mrs. Kowalski lets the women sit until 9, Francis reads, and you write a letter to your mother in Xenia, Ohio. And Vera knits with the focused intensity of someone disarming a bomb, and a woman named Helen Park, who works as a seamstress on the north side, does alterations in the lamplight with a patience that makes you tired just to watch. The letter to your mother is the same letter you write every 2 weeks. You are well. Work is steady. Chicago is cold. You are saving money. You will come home for Christmas if you can get the days. She should not worry. You don't tell her about the cramps. You don't tell her about the 4 cloths that are now 3 and about Agnes's thing on the hook and the bathroom calculations. She knows. She knows the same way she knows everything about the mechanics of female life, through the complete absence of discussion, through the assumption that you received the information you needed in the 30-second conversation at 13, and have since then managed with competence and silence. You love her very much. You wonder sometimes, writing these letters by lamplight in Mrs. Kowalski's back room, what your mother's 30 seconds of knowledge came from. Who taught her? Your grandmother, presumably, who would have learned from her mother, who would have learned from hers, this chain of 30-second functional briefings going back through generations of women who handled the same biological event with decreasing amounts of information and increasing amounts of improvisation, and none of them, not one of them all the way back, ever had access to a product specifically designed for this purpose. This is not ancient history. Your grandmother is 72 years old and living in Springfield. She can call you on the telephone. She has an indoor bathroom. She has electricity. And she navigated 40 years of menstruation with a system of rags, an improvisation that differs only in the specific materials from the system used by women in medieval France. The material situation of half the human population has remained, for practical purposes, static for 1,000 years. Not because of a lack of materials, not because of engineering limitations, but because the problem was not considered a problem worth solving. Because the women who had the problem were not considered people whose problems were worth solving. Because any public acknowledgement of the problem would require a public acknowledgement of the biology, and the biology was a thing you did not discuss. Helen Park holds up the seam she's working on and examines it in the lamplight. She's rehemming a dress for a neighbour's daughter, doing it for a small fee that will cover tomorrow's lunch. Her hands are extraordinary, quick and sure, the needle finding its way through layers of fabric with a certainty that looks like magic, but is 40 years of daily practice. My mother used to make them herself, Helen says, without looking up from her seam. She is 61 years old, Helen Park, and has been in Chicago for 30 years, and when she speaks it is usually worth hearing. Nobody asked her a question. She's continuing a conversation that has been happening in the room for several minutes without anyone speaking. Little bags of cotton, she continues. She'd sew them herself in a row and wash them out, and she had a little washboard, small one, just for that, and she kept them in a tin box that she kept in the back of the wardrobe. She bites off a thread. She had 6 daughters. She made little bags for all of us. Same tin box, same little washboard. When I left home, I took the washboard with me. The room is quiet except for the crackling of the coal in the grate and the sound of Vera's needles. I still have it, Helen says. Something about this hits you in a way you don't entirely expect. The little washboard, carried from home to the city 40 years ago, across what distance and through what circumstances, kept because it was the specific tool for the specific job, the small domestic artifact of a problem that has no public name. You think about the things women carry, the practical equipment of female existence that isn't listed in any catalogue and isn't discussed in any social setting, and isn't recognised in any official accounting of what it means to run a body through a life. The little washboard, the tin box, the cotton batting from Mr. Greer's pharmacy, the cloths in the brown paper at the bottom of the dresser drawer, the hook on the back of the bathroom stall door. All of it invisible, all of it essential, all of it carried quietly by every woman in every city and town and farm in the country for their entire adult lives. The lamp flickers. Helen keeps sewing. Things are going to change, Frances says from behind her magazine. She says it conversationally as a statement of fact. What makes you think so? Helen says. Mathematics, Frances says. They've done it with soap, with canned food, with toothpaste. Once someone realises there's a market and they can reach the market and the market has the money, it becomes a business question. Business questions get solved. She turns a page. The question is when, not whether. The coal pops. Outside, the L rattles past somewhere north of you. I'll believe it when I see it on a shelf, Agnes says from the corner. And she's not been talking this whole time. You thought she was asleep, but she is absolutely awake and has been listening to everything. You put down your pen and fold your letter to your mother. You look at the lamp on the table, the steady yellow flame of it, and you think about what Frances said. A business question. The realization that a market exists. 37 million people, buying something monthly for 40 years of their lives. The math on that is not complicated. Someone is about to do that math. The month turns. December comes in hard. The specific kind of Chicago December that arrives as a declaration rather than a development. The temperature dropping 20 degrees in a day. The lake wind picking up and finding new angles through the inadequate gaps in whatever you're wearing. The streets get bright in the morning with the east that the city never quite addresses, and you learn to walk with a particular gait of the long winter resident, which is slightly bow-legged and slightly slower than you want to be, and very stable in the hips. The holiday season at Hartman means overtime. 2 weeks of Saturday shifts added to the regular schedule, production quotas pushed up to meet the retail orders that come in from the department stores. You take the overtime because you need the money, and also because the alternative is being home in the boarding house room where the heating situation is at its winter worst, and the window has a draft that comes through the frame in a thin, cold stream that no amount of newspaper stuffing has solved. The money from the overtime goes into the envelope you keep in the inside pocket of your coat during transit, and in the bottom of your shoe when you're sleeping. A private bank. The only bank you trust entirely because you control it entirely, which is the operating principle of every working woman's relationship with her money, which is to say, it's yours until it isn't, and you can make it yours longer by keeping it somewhere no one else is likely to look. You're saving for something you don't have a name for yet. Not a plan exactly. Not a house, which is out of the question. Not a husband, which is also not a plan so much as a possible development. Something. Space. More space than you have. Some version of the future that you can't see clearly but can orient toward the way you orient toward the next L station in the dark before you can see it, because you know it's coming. It is on a Saturday afternoon in December that you first see it. You've finished the overtime shift. Your shoulders ache with the particular deep burn of too many hours at a textile machine, and you stop at Walgreens on South Wabash because you need aspirin for the shoulder and also because you told yourself you would stop and look. The store is busy in the late afternoon, the Saturday crowd, people buying Christmas gifts and cough medicine, and the small practical things that constitute the actual gift-giving of working-class life. Where the gifts are aspirin and good soap and stockings and things that will be used and are needed. You get your aspirin, you pay for it, and then you walk toward the back of the store, past the hair goods and the first aid supplies, and you see it. It's on a low shelf, not featured, not at eye level. On a low shelf to the right of the bandage rolls, in a corner of the store that is not on the direct path from the entrance to the register, which is, you understand immediately, entirely intentional, a white box, smaller than you expected, the word Kotex on the front in clean letters, below it, Celicotton sanitary napkins. Sanitary napkins. 2 words that describe the thing directly, in a combination that is simultaneously entirely accurate and completely new. Nobody has printed those 2 words together on a box and put them on a shelf in a Walgreens before this month. Nobody has commercially produced a disposable product for this purpose and made it available for purchase before this moment. You're looking at something that has never existed before. It's smaller than you expected. You thought it would be bigger. It's about the size of a shoebox, but slimmer. There is a small basket on the shelf beside it. A wicker basket with a handle. The basket contains, as you look at it, a small collection of coins. Someone has already made the calculation you are currently making. Several someones. The coins are American nickels and dimes, and they're sitting in the basket quietly, the contribution of women who needed something and could not say what it was. You look at the basket for a long moment. You look at the box. You pick up the box. You do this carefully. the way you might pick up something fragile, which it is not, but the gesture feels appropriate. It is cardboard. It is light. It has an industrial cleanliness to it. The clean of manufactured things, the machine-made precision of something that has been produced at scale in a factory, measured and wrapped and labelled and shipped and placed here on this shelf by a supply chain involving dozens of people and thousands of decisions, and none of them in that chain ever needing to name the reason for the product. You count out the price in your hand, you put it in the basket, you put the box in your shopping bag, under the aspirin. You walk to the exit. You don't make eye contact with anyone. You don't need to. No one has said a word. Outside, on South Wabash, the December air cuts through your coat like a verdict, and you stand for a moment on the sidewalk with your shopping bag, and you feel something that is more complicated than relief, and not quite triumph, but is in the same family as both of those things, a feeling that contains within it the specific recognition of something ending, the little washboard, the tin box, the cloths in the brown paper at the bottom of the dresser drawer, the hook on the back of the bathroom stall door. Not ending tonight, not this month, but ending. You can feel the direction of it. You walk home through the December cold, the L rattling overhead, the stockyard smell on the wind, 9 blocks through the city that has been making you for 14 months. When you get back to the boarding house, you don't say anything at supper. You eat the boiled potatoes and the piece of fish and the bread, and you listen to Ruthie talk about a picture she saw at the Strand Theatre, and Francis's account of a difficult caller at the switchboard who couldn't seem to understand that the line was busy. After supper, upstairs, Vera is already in bed reading a novel with the concentration of someone who has been waiting for this moment all day. You sit on your bed and open the Kotex box. Inside, 12 individually wrapped napkins, white, neatly folded, the cottonwood pulp fibre compressed into a shape that is immediately practically recognisable as exactly what it is. They're thicker than you expected, and lighter than you expected, the combination that makes sense for a material designed to absorb rather than constrain. There's a small instruction card written in language so carefully circumspect that it describes the product's function in 3 paragraphs without ever naming the function. You read it twice. You hold one of the napkins. Feel the weight of it. The texture, which is smoother than cotton batting, more uniform. The thing that's different, the thing that will matter, is that it's disposable. You use it, and you discard it, and you do not wash it, and you do not hide it, and you do not fold it into a piece of brown paper at the bottom of your dresser drawer. You discard it. The implication of this, the simple, practical implication, unspools in your mind. No washing, no hiding, no private system of cloth management that requires a level of logistical skill and domestic infrastructure and personal secrecy that no man who has ever organised a workplace has thought to account for when designing a factory bathroom or a 10-minute break schedule. No more. Vera looks up from her novel. She looks at the box in your hands. She looks at your face. "Is that the Kotex thing?" she says. "Yes." Vera sets her book down. "Does it work?" she says. "I don't know yet. I just got it." She looks at it for a moment. She has the particular expression she gets when she is weighing something. "How much?" she says. You tell her. She nods slowly. She's doing the arithmetic that you did, the calculation that every working woman does, the money versus the thing the money buys, and whether the thing the money buys justifies its position in the hierarchy of necessary expenditures. "I'll try it next month," she says. She picks up her book again. You put the box in your dresser, not in the bottom drawer, in the second drawer, with your good blouse and your spare stockings, not hidden, not concealed. You go to sleep with the sounds of South Halstead drifting up through the floor, and the December wind coming through the cracked window frame, and somewhere out there in the city, 37 million women navigating their monthly lives in whatever way they've learned. Some of them tonight have found the basket. Some of them tonight have picked up the white box with the clean letters on the front. Some of them have done the arithmetic and decided yes and walked out with their shopping bags and felt the thing you felt on the sidewalk. And some of them haven't heard of it yet and won't for years, and will continue with the cloths and the batting and the hook on the bathroom stall door for as long as the supply chains and the economics and the retail geography of their specific lives require them to. Change does not arrive evenly. It comes in the shape of access, and access is always shaped by money and geography and the particular pharmacy you pass on the way home from work, and not everyone passes Walgreens on South Wabash. But it is starting. The thing is starting. You sleep. Winter deepens. The coal in the grate works harder. The streets go grey with the specific Chicago winter grey that is not quite ice and not quite snow, but some combination of both in a state of continuous, inconclusive negotiation with the pavement. Your shoes get their crack in the sole repaired at last by a Romanian cobbler on West 35th who does the job for 15 cents and doesn't look at you while he does it, which you appreciate. You use the Kotex. It works the way the material is reported to work, practically and effectively, and the experience is so different from what you've managed with for 6 years that you spend several minutes the first morning just sitting in the bathroom in the boarding house, not doing anything, just registering the difference. The difference is freedom, a specific kind of freedom, the kind that is made of not having to think about the thing anymore. Not because the thing isn't happening, but because the thing is managed, and managed in a way that doesn't require your ongoing management attention every 45 minutes. Your mind, which has been allocating a certain portion of its daily operational capacity to the calculations and adjustments and monitoring that constitute managing this without adequate tools, gets that capacity back. You don't know what you do with it immediately. You don't have some great insight or productive burst of creativity. You just feel, one Tuesday morning at your station at Hartman Textile Works, like a small background process that has been running continuously in your mind has been turned off. It's very quiet in there, in a good way. Agnes notices the change, not in your demeanour. Agnes doesn't do that kind of noticing, but in some specific operational difference. She watches you at the machine for a few minutes one morning with the attentiveness of someone who is calibrating something. "Did you try the Kotex?" she says at lunch. "Yes." Agnes eats half her sandwich. "And?" "It works," you say. Agnes is quiet. She's doing the calculation, the money calculation, and also some other calculation that you can see running behind her eyes. Agnes has 3 children. Her youngest is 4. Her household budget is precise and pressured in ways that yours, with only yourself to account for, is not. "The price is the problem," she says. "I know. I'd have to give up the Monday bread from Gorski's bakery. Or the week's coal for the front room." She pauses. "That can't be right." "That's right," you say. She sets her sandwich down. "That's an obscene thing," she says, quietly, without anger exactly, but with something more contained and more permanent than anger. The specific quality of a woman who has been doing this arithmetic for 20 years and is now doing it one more time and arriving at the same answer. "They'll come down in price," you say. "Eventually." "Eventually," Agnes repeats. She picks up her sandwich. She eats it. She doesn't say anything else about it. But 2 weeks later, on the hook on the back of the bathroom stall door, there is Kotex napkin, still wrapped, still in its individual paper sleeve, left by someone for someone. The same system, different material. The system adapts. The system always adapts. It has been adapting in bathrooms and dresser drawers and tin boxes and small home washboards for as long as women have been in buildings that were not designed with their needs in mind, which is all of them, which is always, you leave one of yours on the hook the following week, a contribution to the fourth floor bathroom economy, no words required, no acknowledgement necessary. The thing circulates, the way things always circulate in the horizontal economy of women who have less than they need and share what they have. The year turns. 1920 arrives in a Chicago that is crackling with the specific electrical quality of change, the suffrage amendment finally through, women voting for the first time in November, the city going to the polls and women in it for the first time, and you among them, pulling the lever in a polling booth on South Wabash, and feeling the particular solemnity of a right that is new and specific and yours. You vote. You stand in line to vote in your good coat and your good hat and your repaired shoes, and you wait your turn behind a woman in a cleaning woman's uniform, who looks like she has come directly from a morning shift, and a woman in a fur-trimmed coat, who is probably the wife of someone significant, and a girl who cannot be more than 21, and who has the look of someone doing something for the first time and knowing it. You pull the lever, you walk out. The November air is cold. The stockyard smell is on the wind. South Halstead is South Halstead. Nothing has changed. Everything has changed. Both of these things are true at the same time, and you are large enough now, 14 months in Chicago large enough, to hold both of them without needing to resolve them. You walk to work. At lunch, Ruthie tells you about an advertisement she saw in a magazine for Kotex. It has a picture, she says, a woman in a white uniform, like a nurse, and it says something about health and modern living. Does it say what it is? Dorothy asks. Of course not, Ruthie says. Of course not. Because the product exists now, which is a revolution of sorts, a genuine material revolution in the lives of every woman who can afford it and access it. But the product cannot be named in an advertisement in a mainstream magazine because the magazines won't print the words and the advertisers know they won't. And so, the advertisements perform the same function as the Sears catalogue and the basket at the counter and the pharmacy system and all the other elegant machinery of organised public silence. Here is a product for a thing that doesn't happen, which serves the needs you don't have, in a category that doesn't exist. The advertisement will show you a nurse. It will show you cleanliness and health and modernity, and the new liberated woman of the 20th century, striding purposefully into her modern life. It will not say the word menstruation. It will not say the word period. It will say health and comfort and confidence and modern hygienic needs, and it will trust you, the reader, to do the work of understanding what it is selling. You will do that work. You have been doing that work your entire life. The work of reading between the lines. The work of understanding what is being communicated in the language of what is not said. The specific literacy that every woman develops for navigating a world that cannot speak directly about her basic physical reality. This literacy is so deep in you by now that you don't notice you're using it. Ruthie clips the advertisement out of the magazine. She puts it up for a week on the small bulletin board near the bathroom on the 4th floor. No one takes it down. Kowalczyk walks past it twice without apparently seeing it. which is either because he genuinely doesn't process it, or because he has decided that his wisest course of action is not to process it. You look at it every time you pass. The nurse in the white uniform, the clean lines of the thing she's holding, the language that says everything and nothing simultaneously. You think about the women who made this possible, not just the Kimberly-Clark executives, not just the marketers who engineered the basket solution, but the nurses overseas who looked at the material they were using on wounds and made the lateral connection that is always the most obvious connection in retrospect and never seems obvious until someone makes it. The nurses who wrote about it, who shared it with each other, who created the documented evidence that the material worked, that there was a product here, that someone should make it available. Women doing the work of solving the problem, the way women have always done the work of solving the problem quietly, without fanfare, in the margins of a world designed for other purposes. The spring comes in Chicago the way spring comes in Chicago, which is to say aggressively, and then with immediate regret, a week of warmth followed by a frost that surprises everyone, even though this happens every year. You have been at Hartman Textile Works for 2 years now. You know things you did not know when you arrived. You know the particular language of the factory floor, the silent language of glances and gestures that communicates across the machine noise, the shoulder that means the thread is about to break, the tilt of the head that means Kowalczyk is coming, the specific quality of stillness in Agnes's hands when she is deciding something that has nothing to do with thread tension. You know the horizontal language of women managing work and life in the spaces between the official structures, the hook, the basket, the contribution and the taking without acknowledgement, the 30-second exchange at the sink that contains 3 weeks of relevant information in 4 sentences. You know the city in the way that the city gives itself to you when you stop fighting it and start reading it. Which streets to take in which weather, which vendors are honest, where the cheap hot food is, where the L is late on Tuesdays, where not to be after dark. You are becoming someone who knows things. In June, Kowalczyk calls you into his office, which is a room the size of a closet off the 4th floor landing, with a desk and 2 chairs and a window that overlooks the alley, and a smell of cigarette tobacco that has saturated the walls so deeply it has become part of the building's material reality. He offers you floor supervisor. You look at him across the desk. Floor supervisor, the position that walks the floor with the notebook. That is between the workers and management. That knows what Kowalczyk knows and what the women on the floor know and is required to navigate between them. The pay is $12 a week, more than you make now, more than any woman at Hartman makes right now. You think about what it means to know what Kowalczyk knows and what the women on the floor know simultaneously. The specific weight of that. The particular kind of loyalty it requires. To whom? What would my responsibilities be, you say, he explains. Production monitoring, quality control, reporting to management, managing schedule irregularities, the notebook. The women on the floor, you say. If there's a problem, a personal problem, who do they come to? He frowns slightly. This is not the question he expected. They can speak to me, he says. They won't, you say. They won't speak to you about personal problems. This is completely true, and you both know it. A pause. They could speak to you, he says, carefully. You consider this for a moment. Floor supervisor. The notebook. But also the hook. The basket. The 30-second exchange. The horizontal economy of the 4th floor bathroom, which will continue to exist regardless of what job title you have, and which will be better served by someone who is inside it. I'll take the position, you say. Monday, he says. He seems slightly relieved, as though the interview went better than he feared, though he cannot entirely articulate why he feared it. You stand. You shake his hand. You go back to your station for the last 2 hours of the Friday shift. At the station beside you, Agnes doesn't look up from her machine, but after a moment, without breaking rhythm, she says, quietly, in the unmistakable register of information exchange, "Good. Just that. Good." And her hands keep moving, and the thread feeds, and the afternoon shift runs out its remaining hours, and the whistle blows. The responsibility of the new position settles on you gradually, the way Chicago settles into you, in layers, not all at once. First the surface, the notebook, the production numbers, the schedules, then the layer beneath, the women's faces, what they mean, how to read a problem in the slope of someone's shoulders or the quality of stillness in their hands, then the layer beneath that, which is the layer you came for. 2 months into the position, a girl named Maria Szymanski, 17, brand new, 3 weeks off the train from Gdansk, Poland, comes to you on a Monday morning before the whistle. She's standing at the edge of the floor with a quality of frozenness that you recognize the way you recognize the crack in the wall of your own bedroom. You know this pose. You've been this pose. You take her to the bathroom. You explain the hook in the language of demonstration and gesture, because her English is still minimal. You show her the system. You contribute from what you have. She looks at you with an expression that contains shame and gratitude and relief in a proportion that you know well and that hits you, this time, differently than you expect, because you are now on the other side of it, the side that gives rather than takes, and from this side it looks different. From this side you can see the system you are inside, the whole architecture of it, the horizontal transmission of knowledge and material that runs underneath the official structures, invisible to management, invisible to the designers of the factory's official systems, but as structurally essential to the functioning of the 4th floor of Hartman Textile Works as the machines themselves. You think about what Francis said in the back room at Mrs. Kowalski's 2 years ago now, November night. Coal in the grate. They've done it with soap, with canned food, with toothpaste. Once someone realizes there's a market, business questions get solved. The market is being reached, slowly, unevenly, in the shape of who passes Walgreens on South Wabash and who doesn't, in the shape of $12 a week and less, in the shape of which magazine you can afford and which pharmacist you know, and which information reaches you before it reaches someone in a different part of the city or the country. But it is moving. The advertisements get more specific, still not specific in the way that names the thing directly, still not specific in any language you could quote at the dinner table, but more specific than the nurse in the white uniform. The copy begins to acknowledge, in its careful, circumspect way, that there is a monthly thing, a feminine thing, a thing that modern women navigate with modern products. The word menstruation appears finally in a Kotex advertisement in 1921, in Pictorial Review, a small word in small type, at the end of a long paragraph about health and hygiene and the needs of the modern woman. But it appears. Frances shows you the magazine at breakfast on a Sunday. She has marked the page with a piece of folded paper. You read the paragraph. You find the word. You look at it for a moment. It is one word in small type in the back pages of a women's magazine, describing a biological event experienced by every woman alive and never previously printed in a consumer publication. "I'm saving this issue," Frances says. You hand it back to her. "You should," you say. The world is very large, and change moves through it in ways that are not even, and not fast, and not visible in the moment of their happening. The word menstruation in a women's magazine in 1921 will not change Maria Szymanski's Monday morning by itself. It will not change the hook on the back of the stall door, or the basket at the counter, or the whispered language of 30-second bathroom exchanges. It will not immediately reorganize the break schedules at Hartman, or add a hot water tap to the fourth-floor sink, or redesign a factory floor that was built with the assumption that its workers did not have bodies with these specific requirements. But the word is printed, and words, once printed, become part of a record that didn't exist without them. And records change what can be said, and what can be said changes what can be sold, and what can be sold changes what people can buy. And what people can buy changes what they can do with their daily lives, and what they can do with their daily lives changes what they can be. This is a long chain of causation. It runs through decades, not months. It runs through small decisions made in back rooms and bathroom stalls and over bowls of pickled beets at a boarding house table. It runs through the women who kept the little washboard and the women who put the coins in the basket, and the nurses overseas who looked at a wound dressing and thought, also this, you can't see the end of the chain from where you stand. Nobody can. You can only see your piece of it. But you know it's moving. Summer at Hartman is the time of the windows open and the specific smell of hot textile machinery, which is oil and cotton dust and warm metal, and the city's smell coming through the windows, which in August is the stockyards and the lake, and the particular baked quality of 2 million people in a hot city, and the machines are louder somehow, or the heat amplifies sound, or you are more aware of the sound because you're more aware of everything in summer when your body operates at a different register, when the heat and the work and the accumulated months of standing produce a fatigue that has texture to it, a physical quality you can feel in your hands and the soles of your feet. You supervise the floor with the notebook and the attentiveness, and the women know what you are and what you're for, and the thing that makes this position sustainable is the thing you understood when you took it, which is that you are inside the horizontal system and always will be, regardless of title, and that the notebook serves management and the hook serves the women, and you serve both, without betraying either, which is a complicated thing to do and requires a specific kind of moral flexibility that you are learning. Ruthie leaves in September. She goes to Milwaukee, which is home, because her mother is unwell and she's needed. She leaves with a handshake all around and a frank speech at the final supper about what she expects from all of you, which is essentially that you continue to exist vigorously and not take anything from anyone, delivered in the Ruthie way, which is simultaneously stirring and slightly absurd. The station at the end of the row goes to a girl from Alabama named Jessie Calhoun, 20, who has the widest eyes you've ever seen on someone who presents otherwise as entirely impassive. Jessie has the quality, rare in someone her age, of observing a situation completely before speaking about it, which means that her first 3 weeks at Hartman, she says almost nothing and sees almost everything. You recognize this. You've done this. You make sure she knows about the hook. Because this is the transmission. This is how it moves. Not in advertisements, not in magazines, not in the careful deployment of clinical vocabulary in mass-market publications, though all of those matter. It moves this way, in the specific exchange between one person who has the information and one person who needs it, in the 30 seconds between the machines going quiet and the shift restarting. In the gesture toward the hook, in the thing left without words and taken without words and understood without words. This is how women's knowledge has always moved. Under the official structure, through the horizontal network, woman to woman to woman, across centuries, carrying the practical information of bodies and survival in the language that doesn't require a magazine or a pharmacy, or the courage to say a word out loud. You've been part of this network since you were 13. You will be part of it until you are old. The medium changes, the product changes, eventually the words themselves will change, and the magazines will print them, and the advertisements will be direct, and the pharmacy counter will not require a basket. But the network remains. The horizontal transmission of what women know to women who need to know it. The hook, the tin box, the little washboard, the folded napkin in the brown paper sleeve. You have this, and it will not leave you. October. You are 22 years old, and you have been in Chicago for 2 years. The city has finished making you in the ways that cities finish making you. Which is to say, it has stopped being the thing that happens to you, and started being the place you inhabit. The difference between those two things being something you can only understand from the inside once you've crossed to it. You walk to work in the October morning, and the air is clean and cold with the specific clarity that Chicago air gets in October before November's grey descends, the air coming off the lake with the quality of transparency, and you can see farther down South Halstead than you can in summer, all the way to the L structure a dozen blocks south, the iron of it dark against the pale sky. Your feet know the 9 blocks, your coat buttons 3, your lunch pail weighs what it weighs. You know which women on the 4th floor are navigating what, and you know because they told you, not in words but in the ways that are available when words are not. You know Agnes's calculation and Dorothy's efficiency and the particular quality of the new girl Jessie's Tuesday morning stillness, which tells you what you need to know about Tuesday mornings. You carry this knowledge the way Helen Park carried the little washboard, because it belongs to you, because it is yours to carry, because somewhere in the chain of women who carry things forward, this is your piece. The L rattles overhead. The city opens up ahead of you. You keep walking. Winter again. Another Chicago winter, white and iron cold. The streets narrowed by snow that the city plows to the sides and that freezes overnight and stays for weeks. The boarding house is cold from November through March, a fact of life that everyone accommodates in the specific ways available to them, which are more coal, more layers, a kind of concentrated stillness in the cold rooms that conserves warmth, the way certain animals conserve energy, slow and deliberate. Mrs. Kowalski has a new boarder, a woman named Margaret, just arrived from Pittsburgh, 25, who works at a telephone exchange starting Monday. She has the look you remember from your own first weeks, the city is too large look, the everything is unfamiliar look, the look of someone who has not yet learned where the grocery with the cheaper eggs is, or which else stop to avoid, or how to walk on ice in wool-soled shoes without ending up on the pavement. At supper on her 3rd night she's very quiet. The quietness of calibration. You know this quietness. After supper, before you go upstairs, you sit beside her for a moment. You ask her how she's finding the work. She says fine. She asks you how long you've been in Chicago. You tell her. She nods. There's a pause. You tell her about Walgreens, Which counter? The basket system. What to put in the basket and what she'll get for it. You tell her about Mr. Greer's pharmacy as an alternative. You tell her about the hook on the back of the stall door in the 4th floor bathroom, which she may never use, but which is worth knowing exists as a principle. You tell her these things in the same register that everything like this gets told, which is practical and direct and matter of fact, because that is the register that works, the register that communicates I am not embarrassed by this information, and therefore you don't have to be either. She listens, she nods. Thank you, she says. Just that. Small words, carrying a weight she can't name, because there is still, in 1921, no vocabulary for it. The weight of information that arrived in time, that came through a person rather than through a system that doesn't exist, that was transmitted in the only channel reliably available, which is person to person, woman to woman, across the back room of a boarding house on South Halstead. Of course, you say, and you go upstairs. In the attic room, Vera is reading. The new girl, Maria Simansky's replacement since Maria married and moved to Southside in August, is already asleep, dark hair spread on the pillow, breathing the steady breathing of early sleep. You sit on your bed. The window has the December dark behind it, the particular deep dark of early winter evenings, 6 o'clock and already black outside. You think about your mother in Xenia, Ohio. You think about the letter you owe her 2 weeks overdue. You think about what she taught you at 13, and what she didn't teach you, and what you had to learn from Vera and Agnes and Francis and Helen Park and the hook on the bathroom stall door, and Mr. Greer's pharmacy, and a white box on a low shelf in a Walgreens in November 1919. You think about Margaret downstairs, who will go to work on Monday and will know where the counter is. You pull out your writing paper, you start the letter. You are well, work is good. The city is cold, but you have learned it's cold by now, and it doesn't surprise you. You're saving money. You will try to come for Christmas. She should not worry. You fold the letter. You seal it. You put it in your coat pocket for tomorrow. Outside, Chicago is being Chicago. The EL, the cold, the stockyards smell on the west wind. The 2.5 million people doing what people do in cities in December, which is everything, which is survival and commerce and love and ambition and all the small private negotiations with a world that is large and various and mostly indifferent and occasionally generous in the way that cities are generous, which is anonymously and without ceremony, and in the forms you didn't know to ask for. You lie down. The room is cold enough to see your breath, just barely, the faintest plume in the lamplight before you turn it down. You pull the blanket up. You close your eyes. The sounds of the city drift up through the floor. The L, always the L, rhythmic and reliable as a heartbeat you have absorbed into your own. The voices of someone on the street below, indistinct, purposeful. The clank of the heating pipes attempting their nightly business of warming this building and largely failing. You are tired in the specific way that 2 years of standing at a machine makes you tired. A tiredness that goes into the muscles of your legs and stays there. Your back aches pleasantly with the specific ache of work done, which is different from the ache of things gone wrong. You are warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a floor to supervise and women to know, and a letter to mail and 9 blocks you understand completely, and an L map in your head, and the price of coal, and the hours of the cheaper bakery, and the system of the hook, and the basket, and the small washboard that Helen Park carried from home 40 years ago, that is still out there somewhere in a drawer or a cupboard, or perhaps by now passed along to someone else who needed a small specialized tool for a specific private purpose. You have this city, you have these women, you have what you know. Tomorrow the whistle blows at 7:15. You'll be there, but that's tomorrow. Spring comes to Chicago the way spring always comes to Chicago, which is to say it arrives as a rumour before it arrives as a fact. A day in late February that smells of water and mud beneath the ice. A suggestion, a false promise that the city immediately takes back for another 6 weeks before finally delivering the actual article in April. You learn to distrust the February thaw. You learn to wait for April with the patient skepticism of someone who's been fooled by February before. You're 23 in April of 1922. You've been floor supervisor at Hartman Textile Works for nearly 2 years. The job has become, in the way that jobs become things, not what you do, but what you are, which is either a sign of success or a warning, and you spend occasional Sunday mornings trying to determine which. The floor has changed, partly because you are on it in a different capacity, which changes the way you see it, partly because the women change. Women come and go through Hartman the way water comes and goes through a place that is moving, always moving, passing through, leaving traces. Dorothy Chen left in January for a bookkeeping position at a firm on Michigan Avenue, which everyone predicted and no one was surprised by, Dorothy having a quality of mathematical precision that was always going to find its level somewhere above a textile winding station. Agnes is still at her machine. Agnes will be at her machine until the machine stops, or Agnes does, whichever comes first, and neither of them appears to be in any hurry. The new women come, and you observe them, and you transmit what needs transmitting, and you keep the notebook the way Kowalczyk wants, and you keep the other knowledge the way the floor requires, and these two things coexist in you with the specific tension of two systems running simultaneously on the same equipment, and you are learning to manage that tension the way you manage thread tension, which is by feel, which is by long practice, which is by knowing what it sounds like when it's about to break. In April, a woman named Mabel Hooper joins the 4th floor. She is 38 and has worked at a factory in Detroit, and before that one in Cleveland, and before that she worked in domestic service for 12 years, which she left, she'll tell you at lunch in the 2nd week, because of a thing that happened. She tells you the thing that happened on a Wednesday. Not with difficulty, not in the way that hard things get told sometimes, with halts and approaches and retreats. She tells it with the flatness of someone who's been carrying it long enough that it has lost its jagged edges through handling. She was in domestic service in a house in Cleveland. A good house, substantial house, the kind with a butler's pantry and a morning room and a laundry in the basement staffed by 2 women. She had been there 6 years. Her position was housemaid, which meant the bedrooms and sitting rooms, the daily work of making a wealthy family's living space look like no one lived in it. The month she left, she was managing the beginning of her period at a particular difficult moment. Heavy, early, unexpected by 2 days. Caught without adequate preparation in a situation where preparation was not possible to arrange. Because her half-day off was Thursday, and this was Monday, and she was on the 3rd floor of a house where she was not permitted to be seen by family members except when actively performing a visible household function. The thing she did not have was time to get to her room. The thing she did not have was material. The thing she did not have was a bathroom she was permitted to use on this floor. The bathroom on this floor was the family bathroom, and the servants used the bathroom off the back kitchen, 2 floors down, 2 floors down. She managed with what she had, which was not enough, which she knew before she tried to manage with it. She managed until she couldn't. And what happened then happened in the third-floor hallway while she was carrying a pile of linens to the linen press. And what happened was noticed by the woman of the house, who said nothing at the time, which was somehow worse than if she had said something, and said something later, privately to Mabel's face. And what she said was not unkind in its intention, and was devastating in its effect. And 2 weeks later, Mabel gave notice and went to Cleveland and then Detroit and then Chicago. She tells you this on a Wednesday at lunch, eating a sandwich, not looking at you, not looking anywhere in particular. You listen. When she's done, you are quiet for a moment, not out of discomfort, but out of the respect owed to a thing told plainly. Then you tell her about the hook. You tell her the system. You tell her the basket at Walgreens and Mr. Greer's pharmacy and the 30-second exchange and all the things that constitute the working knowledge of this floor on this question. You tell her everything Agnes told you, and what Vera told you, and what Francis told you about business questions getting solved, and what Helen Park told you about the little washboard carried from home. Mabel listens. She eats her sandwich. Her expression doesn't change. Should have had all that in Cleveland, she says. Yes, you say. Should have had it 6 years before Cleveland. Yes. She finishes her sandwich. She folds the wax paper neatly. She looks at you directly for the first time in this conversation. You know what the worst part was, she says. Not what she said, not the thing itself. The worst part was that I knew, the second it happened, that there was absolutely nothing I could have done differently. No choice I could have made. Because the whole system of that house, every rule of it, was set up for the family's comfort and the servants' invisibility. And those two requirements in that one moment were impossible to satisfy simultaneously. It was structurally impossible. And nobody who designed that system ever thought about whether it was possible, because nobody ever had to. She tucks the folded wax paper into her lunch pail. Nobody who designed any of these systems ever had to, she says. That's the whole of it, really. The whistle blows. You think about what Mabel said for the rest of the afternoon. You think about it in the spaces between the machine noise and the thread monitoring and the notebook entries. Nobody who designed any of these systems ever had to. The bathrooms 2 floors down, the 10-minute break schedule, the factory floor without a single person in its design process who menstruated, and therefore without a single design decision that accounted for menstruating, not because it was impossible to account for, but because the accounting required first acknowledging the thing existed, and the thing, in the social grammar of 1922, did not officially exist. The 3rd floor of the house in Cleveland. The 2 floors down. The structural impossibility. This is the architecture of the problem. Not malice. Architecture. A built environment designed by people without certain requirements, for people with those requirements, who are then expected to meet the requirements of the built environment as though they do not have the requirements of their own bodies. And the built environment never adjusts because the adjustment would require naming the requirement, and naming the requirement would require saying the word that is now, in 1922, in the back pages of Pictorial Review. Small type, there. The word is not going back in the box it came from, but the built environment is slow. It adjusts to words in magazines on a delay of years or decades, and in the meantime, the 3rd floor of the house in Cleveland remains what it is, and the bathroom remains 2 floors down. And Mabel Hooper is on the 4th floor of Hartman Textile Works in Chicago instead. That evening you write 2 letters instead of 1. Your mother gets her usual, well, working, cold, saving, Christmas if possible. The second letter you've been writing in your head for 3 months, since Kowalczyk mentioned in his circumspect way that the Worshipful Association of Textile Manufacturers of Chicago's Illinois chapter, an organization that means nothing to you personally, has a subcommittee on workplace conditions that is soliciting comment from floor supervisors. The comment is about break schedules and bathroom facilities and what changes, if any, supervisors would recommend. It is a form letter. It invites comment in the way that organizational form letters invite comment, which is to say, not very urgently, and with the clear implication that comment received will be filed. You have been deciding what to say. You say, the current break schedule of 2 10-minute breaks per 8-hour shift is insufficient for the sanitary requirements of a floor staffed entirely by women. A third break of equal length would reduce incidents of absence and health-related issues that are not currently tracked or reported, but which represent a significant and quantifiable cost to production. Additionally, the provision of hot water in the 4th floor bathroom would reduce the incidence of hand and skin conditions in workers using cold water for sanitary purposes year-round. These changes would cost, in your estimate, less than 1/2 of 1% of the payroll cost of the floor in increased break time loss, and would recover that cost through reduced absenteeism within 6 months. You say it in those words. Business words. The language Francis said business questions get answered in. You don't say sanitary requirements because women menstruate. You don't say the hooks on the bathroom stall doors and the things left on them that constitute the informal infrastructure of this floor's actual function. You don't say Mabel Hooper in the house in Cleveland. You say sanitary requirements and incidents of absence and quantifiable cost. You mail it with your letter to your mother. 3 months later, the 4th floor gets a 3rd break and a hot water tap in the bathroom sink. Not because of your letter. You don't know if your letter was read. You don't know if it contributed 1% or 100% to a decision that might have been made for entirely different reasons. Cost calculations you weren't party to, recommendations from other supervisors, a simple infrastructure repair that got batched with your suggestion by accident. You don't know. But the break exists. The hot water tap exists. And on a November morning very like the November morning 3 years ago when you stood in the cold in the boarding house with 3 cloths and 1 hour and 28 minutes, the women on the 4th floor of Hartman Textile Works have 11 minutes instead of 10, and water that comes out warm. These are not large things. They are not the transformation of the structural impossibility into a structural possibility. They are adjustments, small calibrations of a built environment that still doesn't officially acknowledge why the adjustments were needed. But 11 minutes is different from 10. In the specific arithmetic of managing a body on a factory floor, 1 minute is not nothing. 1 minute is the difference between the math working and the math not working. Agnes at the sink with warm water on the first morning of the new schedule looks at you across the bathroom. She doesn't say anything, but she turns the tap, and the water is warm. And something in her face registers this briefly before going back to its usual working expression. That's enough. The summer of 1922 is hot in the way Chicago summers are hot, which is humid and heavy and close, the lake not providing the cooling influence you'd expect from its presence, but instead generating its own weather system, the heat pressing down on the city with a specific weight of trapped air. The stockyards in this heat are a sensory experience that even Chicago residents find difficult to sustain. and the distance from the stockyards is the primary organising principle of residential desirability on the south side, which is to say, everyone wants to be north of the smell and east toward the lake, and everyone who isn't is in the geography of what they can afford. Mrs. Kowalski's boarding house is in the geography of what most of you can afford, which is 7 blocks from the line where the smell becomes something else, something that people north and east of it would simply call summer, and you've gotten used to it the way you've gotten used to everything, which is not by not smelling it anymore, but by incorporating it into your baseline, your starting point, the thing against which other smells are measured. Frances leaves in July. She's been offered a supervisory position at the telephone exchange downtown, a significant step, a position that requires her to move to a boarding house on the north side close to the office. She leaves with the efficiency you expect from Frances, which is to say she informs everyone with adequate notice, sorts her belongings with precision, and on her last evening at supper gives you the complete run of Pictorial Review and Ladies' Home Journal from the past 18 months, which she has kept stacked on the shelf in her room, and which she determines cannot travel efficiently. Keep reading, she says. Everything is going to be in print before it's anywhere else. If you want to know what's coming next, watch what gets printed. She shakes your hand. She leaves. You keep reading. What you read in the magazines over the following 2 years is a slow transformation in the grammar of menstrual product advertising. The transformation moves in the direction of directness, but slowly the way very large objects change direction, requiring a great deal of time and effort to execute what is ultimately a small angular change. The advertisements get more specific without getting specific. They develop a vocabulary that is not the vocabulary of menstrual reality, but is recognizably pointed in that direction. A sophisticated coded language that you learn to read with the same literacy you've developed for all the other indirect languages of female life. They speak of protection and freedom and confidence and the modern woman's needs, and somewhere between those words and the white box with the clean letters, every woman reading understands what's being discussed. The interesting development is the educational campaign. Kimberly-Clark, which is not stupid, understands the problem of distribution. It understands that it has a product for which there is an enormous market, and that the market has, in substantial portions, not yet been reached, and that the reason it hasn't been reached is not the quality of the product, but the quality of the silence surrounding the problem the product solves. The silence is so total in some segments of the market that women don't know the product exists, or know it exists but don't know they can access it, or know they can access it but cannot bring themselves to execute the transaction, or bring themselves to execute the transaction, but don't receive the information they need to use the product correctly because the product comes with instructions, written in the language of things that aren't named. The solution Kimberly-Clark lands on is the educational campaign, which is a beautiful piece of organizational ingenuity. It works as follows. A company representative, a woman, goes to a school. She speaks to the girls. She speaks about health and hygiene and the modern body's modern needs. She does not use the words menstruation or period in a way that a superintendent might later regret inviting her in for. She distributes a pamphlet. The pamphlet is about hygiene. The pamphlet contains, in its middle section, specific and practical information about menstrual management and the products available for it. The pamphlet is then taken home. The pamphlet is then seen by mothers. The mothers, who have not previously had access to the information in any direct or comfortable form, read the pamphlet. The pamphlet reaches them through their daughters, which is to say backwards up the generational chain, the reverse of every previous transmission of this information, which has always moved from mother to daughter in 30-second installments of minimal functionality. The daughter learns first. The mother learns from the daughter. This inversion is not accidental. This is design. You read about the educational campaign in a trade journal that Frances sends you from her new address on the North Side, because Frances still thinks about these things and knows you do too. The trade journal describes it in business terms: market penetration, demographic reach, brand loyalty establishment in the youth consumer. It describes it without a trace of irony or self-awareness about what it is, which is a corporation developing a solution to the problem of a thing that cannot be spoken, in the specific form of a pamphlet that can be given to girls, because girls can receive information about their bodies in an educational setting more easily than women can receive it in a commercial setting. The magazine can't say the word, the advertisement can't say the word, the pharmacy clerk can't say the word, but the school health education pamphlet can say the word. And once the word is in the pamphlet, and the pamphlet is in the school, and the school is where the girls are, the word gets out. It's 1923, and the word is getting out, and everything is slow, but nothing is stopped. You think about your own 30-second conversation at 13, your mother's minimal briefing on the mechanical facts, the specific thing it gave you and the specific things it didn't give you and what you had to acquire after from Vera and Agnes and the fourth floor bathroom economy. If there had been a pamphlet, if there had been, at 13, a pamphlet that used accurate words and practical information and described not just what was happening, but what to do about it, and that what to do about it was available for purchase at a Walgreens. If there had been that. You look at the trade journal description of the educational campaign, and you feel the same thing you felt holding the white box on the sidewalk on South Wabash in November 1919. Not quite triumph, not quite relief. Something in the same family as both. Cautious hope still. But the cautious and the hope are shifting in their proportions. What the educational campaign also does, and the trade journal does not discuss this because it is not a business consideration, is begin to build a vocabulary. Not just in girls' pamphlets, in women's magazines, in casual conversation, in the spaces where women talk to each other about things that affect their lives. The vocabulary exists now, commercially printed, commercially distributed, on paper that can be touched and read and kept or burned or passed along. The vocabulary exists. Language does something once it's printed. It cannot be unprinted. The word in the back of Pictorial Review is there, in ink on paper, in libraries and parlours, and the back rooms of boarding houses across the country. Someone will find it. Someone will read it. Someone who has never had a word for this before will have a word. That matters. In ways you can't fully articulate and don't try to. That matters enormously. The autumn of 1923. You are 24 and you have been at Hartman for 3 years. The floor knows you completely by now. Not in the way that people know each other through proximity and conversation, but in the way that a place knows someone who moves through it daily, who is present in its rhythms and its silences, whose absence would register as a change in the weather. Mabel Hooper has been promoted to operate the cutting room, which she is excellent at. She has the precision for it, the spatial intelligence, the ability to read a piece of cloth and see the shapes that can come from it with minimal waste. She is making more money than she made as a housemaid in Cleveland, and she knows more people who know her name, and she eats lunch on the 4th floor sometimes, and talks about things other than the thing she told you in April of 1922. Though you both know it's there, part of the architecture of how you understand each other. The new girls are younger, many of them. The generation coming into the workforce now, girls born in 1905 and 1906, who have grown up in a world where the suffrage amendment passed when they were 14 and they went to school during the war, and some of them have sisters who went to work in factories during the war and came home different, knowing something about the difference between being necessary and being decorative. These girls are different, not dramatically different, not in the way of a rupture or a revolution, but different in the specific small ways that 2 decades of incremental shift produce, the way a current carries things even when the surface of the water looks still. They talk differently, not about menstruation, not directly, not in the presence of supervisors or anyone outside the specific trust network, but differently. The voice they use for it is less lowered. The shame in it, which is still there, is worn differently, more like an inconvenience than a moral condition. They are angry about the inconvenience in ways their mothers weren't, or if their mothers were, their mothers had no vocabulary for the anger and no channel for it. These girls have Kotex and the educational pamphlet and the word in pictorial review and the suffrage amendment. They still don't have hot showers in the 4th floor bathroom, and they still don't have break schedules designed for bodies that menstruate, and they still can't buy a product in a department store without a basket. But they have more than their mothers had, and they feel the distance between what they have and what they should have more clearly because they can see across it more easily. They are the beginning of something. You watch them the way Agnes watched you, and you watch the floor the way Kowalczyk watches it, which is with the attention of someone who is measuring not production numbers but temperature, the feeling of the air in the room, the specific weight of what's happening and what might happen. Nothing dramatic happens. This is not a story where something dramatic happens on the factory floor to change everything. This is a story where the day shifts accumulate, and the seasons turn, and the things that change slowly, and the things that don't change quickly, and everyone keeps going to work. This is how it actually happens, most of it. The great historical transformations you read about in books are made of this material. People going to work, people eating lunch, people laying an extra napkin on the hook, people writing a letter to an organisational subcommittee about break schedules in the language of quantifiable cost. It accumulates. The change is in the accumulation. You can't see it while you're in it. You can only feel its direction, the way you can feel the direction of a current in water you're standing in. You can feel it's moving. Chicago in 1924 is a city in motion. The city is always in motion, but 1924 has a specific quality of forward momentum. The Prohibition-era economy doing what economies do in Prohibition conditions, which is create industries around the circumvention of the Prohibition. And the circumvention industries create employment and entertainment and a particular atmosphere of permissive illegality that the city navigates with the pragmatism of a place that has been pragmatic about illegality since it invented itself. You don't drink, not because of the moral position on alcohol, which you don't have with any strong conviction, but because the boarding house doesn't permit it, and the places where you'd go to drink are not places you want to spend what you earn, and you've watched enough of the gin shop logic at the factory, which is not gin exactly, but is the same principle, women drinking away the money that should be keeping them, to have a practical rather than moral reason to abstain. What you do instead, on the 2 evenings a week that you have after supper, that aren't consumed by the exhaustion of the day, is read Francis's magazines, The newspaper, the Tribune, which one of the male boarders leaves on the hall table when he's done with it. Occasionally a novel, borrowed from Helen Park or Agnes. And what you read about, in the pages of magazines and the back sections of the Tribune, alongside the advertisements for automobiles and patent medicines and Chesterfield cigarettes, is a conversation beginning to happen about women's bodies in public. Not a conversation about menstruation, not that directly. A broader conversation about women's health, about women's physicality, about the modern woman's relationship to her body, which is different from the Victorian woman's relationship to her body, which was one of elaborate theoretical denial. The modern woman, as the magazines construct her, has a body. She exercises it and maintains it and pays attention to it and consults a doctor about it. She wears fewer layers and tighter garments and moves with more freedom, not because she's immoral, but because she's practical, because the layer upon layer architecture of Victorian dress was not designed for a woman who works in a factory or rides the eel or plays tennis or operates a typewriter for 8 hours a day. The modern woman's body exists. This is, in 1924, a relatively recent public acknowledgement. And once the body exists, once it is permitted to exist in public discourse, its requirements begin to follow, slowly, in the language of health and hygiene and medical modernity. But they follow. The Kotex advertisements get bolder, not immediately bolder, not in the way that a thing gets dramatically bolder, in the way that a tide comes in, which is imperceptibly until you look back and see how much ground it has covered. By 1924, the Kotex advertisement in Ladies' Home Journal uses the word menstrual in the headline, not the text, not buried in the body copy, the headline. Frances mails you the page. She marks it with a pencil check in the margin. You look at it for a long time. The headline, the word. In a magazine that sits on the hall table of respectable middle-class houses across the country, that wives read and daughters read, and sometimes husbands pick up and flip through in the way that husbands pick up things that are lying around. The word in the headline, there. You think about Helen Park's little washboard. You think about the tin box. You think about Mr. Greer sliding the brown paper package across the counter without looking up. You think about the basket at Walgreens in November 1919, the coins in it, the weight of them. One word in a headline, in ink, public. You put the page down. You pick it up again. You think about what word feels like when it lands, when language catches up to reality. When the thing that has been managed in silence for generations is given, not just a product, but a name that can be printed in a magazine and left on the hall table. You think about all the women who will see this headline who've never had a word for this before. Women in the generations before you, who are still alive, who navigated 40 years without a word for it, who will pick up this magazine and read this headline and have, for the first time in print, publicly, irrevocably, the confirmation that the thing is real, that it exists, that it can be named, that it can be named. The specific weight of that, for women who have spent their lives in the grammar of what cannot be said. You're 25 years old. You put the magazine page in the envelope with the stack of things you save, the letter from Francis about the third break, the trade journal page about the educational campaign, the original advertisement with the nurse in the white uniform, a file of evidence, a record. You don't know what it's evidence of exactly, or for whom. You just know you want to keep it. Things are accumulating. In 1925 you leave Hartman, not because of anything that happens at Hartman, because of what happens at a meeting. Frances invites you, in October, to a meeting of the Women's Trade Union League chapter on the North Side. She attends these meetings and has mentioned them in her letters as a thing that might interest you, and that you've deflected because the North Side requires an L trip, and the L costs money, and Saturday evenings are already short of time. But Frances asks you directly, in a letter that is less oblique than her usual correspondence, and you go. The meeting is in a church hall on North Clark Street. 15 women, mostly older than you, mostly in the trades or clerical work. The subject of this particular meeting is workplace health and the proposed revisions to the state's factory inspection regulations. There is a woman from the state inspector's office and a woman from the National Consumers League and Francis, who has opinions about telephone operator working conditions that she has apparently been developing and expressing in this venue for some time. You sit in the back, you listen. You have the notebook habit, the supervisor's habit of recording the significant thing, and you have a small notebook in your coat pocket and you write in it. What you write is this: there is a language being spoken in this room that is the language of official advocacy, not the language of the fourth floor bathroom, not the horizontal network, the vertical language of institutional change, of regulations and inspections and formal testimony and the machinery of the state. It is a language you have not spoken before. You can follow it. You are following it, but you haven't spoken it. By the end of the meeting, you have 3 pages of notes and a question that you've been sitting with for 45 minutes and that you ask when Frances opens the floor to questions. You say, what provisions exist in the proposed factory inspection revisions for bathroom access and break frequency in facilities that employ primarily women? The woman from the state inspector's office looks at you. She says, that's not addressed in the current draft. You say, why not? She starts to explain the scope of the revision, which is focused on structural safety and machinery guarding standards. You listen, you wait. You say structural safety and machinery guarding also affect women workers who represent, and here you give the number because you looked it up, because Frances told you to look it up before you came. 41% of the manufacturing workforce in Chicago. And bathroom access and break frequency affect women's health in specific and documentable ways that have costs, both to the workers and to the productivity of the facilities they work in. And if the revision is addressing workplace health, the exclusion of this issue is a significant gap. You say it in the language of quantifiable cost, the language Frances said business questions get answered in. The room is quiet for a moment. The woman from the inspector's office writes something in her notebook. She says, would you be willing to provide a written account of your observations as floor supervisor at your facility? You say yes. You write it. Over 3 weeks, in the evenings, in the back room at Mrs. Kowalski's, you write 14 pages describing what you have seen and what you know, and what the third break cost the company in production time, and what it saved in absenteeism, and what the hot water tap cost the building superintendent, and what it changed in the daily health of the women using it, and what the 10-minute break means versus the 11-minute break in the specific arithmetic of female bodies managing female requirements in facilities designed by and for people who do not have those requirements. You write it in the flattest possible language. Every number you can find, every observation you can document. No words about the hook. No words about the tin box or the little washboard. The language of regulatory testimony, which is not the language of the thing, but which reaches the people who can do something about the thing. You send it. You don't know what happens to it. You don't know if it's read. You return to work. The days continue. In March, you receive a letter from the Women's Trade Union League. They are starting an advocacy office on the West Side. They need someone who knows factory floors and can speak the language of operations, and has the kind of first-hand documented knowledge that makes testimony credible in formal settings. It's not a fully funded position. It's a partial stipend and a desk, and the rest you make up by doing work for other clients of the office. You sit with this for a week. You sit with it the way you sit with things now, which is with the particular patience of a floor supervisor, the patience of someone who has learned to wait for the full picture before making the calculation. The full picture. You have been at Hartman for 5 years. You have done the job well. Kowalczyk respects you and will give you a reference. Agnes is Agnes. The floor runs. Nothing here will stop without you. It will adjust and continue. The women of the 4th floor are in a better position than they were in 1920 incrementally, by the width of 1 minute and the temperature of tap water, and those increments matter. But they are not enough. They're not close to enough. And there is a language being spoken in the church hall on North Clark Street that reaches further than the 4th floor of Hartman, that goes up rather than across, that operates in the vertical rather than the horizontal. You know the horizontal. You've been in it for years. The vertical is new. You give Kowalczyk your notice on a Monday morning. You give him 2 weeks. He looks at you with the expression of a man encountering something he expected and didn't want to meet. He says, "I hope they know what they're getting." You say, "I hope so too." Agnes, when you tell her, looks at you for a long moment. Then she nods. "Good," she says. The same word, the same one she gave you when you took the supervisor position. Agnes has always communicated efficiently. On your last day at Hartman, the 4th floor women do something unexpected. At the end of the afternoon shift, when the whistle blows and the machines stop, instead of dispersing immediately as they always do, they stay. They stand at their stations. All 26 of them, the ones who were there in your first week and the ones who arrived last month. They stand there, and there is a moment, brief, before Kowalczyk notices, and the moment ends, where you see the floor as a whole thing, the shape of it, the women in it, knowing what they know, carrying what they carry. Mabel Hooper, who came from Cleveland and has the flat voice of someone who has put something very heavy down. The girl from Alabama, Jessie Calhoun, who spent 3 weeks watching before she spoke, and now has the quality of measured confidence that comes from that kind of patient observation. The new ones, the young ones, the girls born in 1905, who have the word in the magazine headline and Kotex in the Walgreens and the educational pamphlet and the vote, and all the small accumulated things that they are adding to and will add to further. They stand there for the moment it takes. Then the moment ends and they disperse, because this is still a factory floor in 1925, and the moment of stillness is the most it will offer. You walk out. The Women's Trade Union League office on West Madison Street is 3 rooms above a tailor shop, reached by a staircase that is narrow and very steep, and not designed for anyone carrying a large armload of files, which everyone in the office is always carrying. The office smells of coffee and paper and the cigarettes smoked by a woman named Hannah, who is the office director, and who smokes constantly and without apology, and who has the specific quality of focused intelligence that you recognize from Francis, the quality of someone who has thought harder and longer about something than anyone around them, and has arrived at a place of calm clarity about it. Hannah is 53. She's been doing this since before you were born. She's been doing this since the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, which is not metaphorically true. It is actually true. She was in New York in 1911 when it happened, and what she saw and did in the weeks following it is the reason she's been doing this for 22 years. You don't ask about the fire directly. But over the weeks of learning the office, the specific texture of it comes through in the pieces Hannah mentions in passing. The facts she states as baseline knowledge, because they are her baseline knowledge, the 146 women who died, and the specific shape of why they died, which was locked doors and inadequate exits, and a building not designed for the people inside it to leave when it became necessary to leave. A building not designed for the people inside it. You recognise this architecture. You work in the office on the cases the office works on, which are workplace safety and wage disputes, and the labour conditions of the women in domestic service, and the garment workers and the laundry workers, and all the categories of working women who have the least institutional protection and the most constant exposure to conditions that extract their labour, and do not particularly care what happens to them in the extracting. You learn the vertical language completely. The regulations and the inspection schedules and the testimony formats, and which alderman responds to which kind of pressure, and what the newspapers will print and what they won't, and who at the Tribune has actually read the Labour Code, and who is simply performing the reading of it. You learn this the way you learned the factory floor, through observation and practice and the specific transmission of knowledge from the people who have it to you, who are learning to have it. And you carry, alongside this language, the other one, the horizontal, the hook and the basket and the tin box, the 30-second exchange at the bathroom sink, the practical operational knowledge of what women manage in silence, in the built environments not designed for them, daily, constantly, across their entire working lives. Both languages, at the same time, in the same person. You are the translation. It is 1927. You are 28 years old. The office takes a case in the fall that involves a garment factory on the west side and allegations of inadequate facilities and break conditions. You go to the factory. You walk the floor. You know how to walk a factory floor. The supervisor there is a man named Garvey, who is not Kowalczyk, but has the same relationship with the notebook and the same way of looking at you that says he is not sure what you are, but he is going to treat you as manageable until proven otherwise. You speak to the women. You know how to speak to the women. Not with the questionnaire language, not with the formal interview language. The other way, the sideways way, at the sink, in the break, in the register that acknowledges the horizontal without naming it. You get what you need. The case is resolved in 6 months. The factory installs a second set of bathroom facilities on the production floor and extends the lunch break by 10 minutes. These are not large victories. These are adjustments, increments, the width of 1 minute, the temperature of water. But you know what increments do. You've been watching them accumulate for years. The crash. You know the crash the way the city knows it. Not from the newspapers first, but from the texture of the streets, the quality of the morning on the eel, the specific weight of the air in rooms where people are calculating. You know it from what happens to the faces of the women at the trade union office, the particular combination of tiredness and determination that sits in a face that has seen this before. The crash does specific things to working women that are different from what it does to men in the specific ways that being at the bottom of a labour market does different things than being at any other position. The domestic servants lose their positions first because the households that employ them can no longer afford them. The factory workers face layoffs in the specific pattern of last in, first out, which disproportionately affects the women who were given access to manufacturing work during the war, and have been navigating the precarity of that access ever since. The shop girls and telephone operators and office workers face wage cuts before layoffs. which is a different but equally precise form of extraction. And the product. In the language of economic contraction, the product that is a luxury goes first. The Kotex, which was expensive relative to the alternatives in 1919 and is less expensive in 1929 but is still not free, gets cut from budgets across the city. The women who adopted it in the boom years of the mid-1920s return, in 1929 and 1930, to what they had before: the cloth, the batting from Mr. Greer, the improvised solutions. Not all of them. Not everyone's budget collapses to that level, but enough. The hook on the back of the bathroom stall door, which has been seeing less use in the years of relative prosperity, sees more use again. The horizontal economy of contribution and taking, which never actually went away, intensifies. The system is still there. The system never went anywhere. It is the bottom layer, the one you return to when the upper layers become unavailable. This makes you think about something that takes a while to articulate. The product, the commercial solution, is better than what came before it. This is straightforwardly true. It works better. It costs time differently. It costs money differently. It costs shame differently. All of those costs are reduced. The basket at Walgreens is a humiliation, but it is a small humiliation compared to the humiliation Mabel Hooper experienced in the house in Cleveland, which was a structural humiliation built into the architecture of her working life. The product is better, but the product is not enough, because the product is subject to the price of cotton and the decisions of a company in Neenah, Wisconsin, and the purchasing power of women in an economy that is currently in free fall. The product can be taken away by forces that have nothing to do with whether women need it. What cannot be taken away is the horizontal network, the knowledge that is transmitted sideways, woman to woman, in 30 seconds at the bathroom sink. The hook. The system of contribution and taking that exists in every workplace where women gather, in the bathrooms and break rooms and coat closets, because women have been building that system since before there was a product, and they will maintain it when the product becomes unaffordable, and they will use both when both are available. The product and the network. Both necessary. Neither sufficient without the other. You think about this in the office on West Madison in 1930, watching the caseload shift in the shape of the Depression, the domestic servants arriving with their situations, the factory workers with their layoff notices, the shop girls with their cut wages and their need for everything their bodies still require, regardless of whether Hartman Textile Works is still making the same production quotas as 1927. The body does not observe economic conditions. The body continues its monthly accounting on whatever schedule the body observes in apartments that are now shared by 3 people instead of 1, in boarding houses where Mrs. Kowalski has had to let 2 rooms stand empty because the boarders left for cheaper options, in factory bathrooms where the hot water tap that was installed in 1921 is now being argued about by the building's new ownership, which is looking for things to cut. In 1931, you read about a man in Denver named Earl Haas. You read about him in the trade journal, not the feminist press, not the women's magazine, the trade journal that covers the medical supply and personal hygiene industries. Earl Haas is a doctor. An osteopath, technically. He has invented a thing. He has invented a thing that is, in the world of menstrual management, approximately equivalent to the invention of the internal combustion engine relative to the horse, in the sense that it is not a better version of what existed, but a different principle entirely. He has invented the internal applicator tampon. You read the trade journal description twice. You read the patent description, which is included in the article in the language of patent descriptions, which is clinical and specific and completely without embarrassment, because patent descriptions exist in the world of professional medical documentation and not in the world of social grammar. The principle, rather than external absorption, internal. The material, compressed cotton with an applicator tube to facilitate insertion. The claimed benefits: complete invisibility, no external apparatus, full freedom of movement, no risk of external evidence, no external evidence. You put the trade journal down, you pick it up again. No external evidence means, in the language of the working woman's daily management of this problem, no calculation about whether the cloth will hold for the next 45 minutes, no monitoring of the clock, no bathroom visits scheduled around the requirements of the arrangement rather than the requirements of the machine schedule, no adjustments, no awareness that must be maintained alongside the awareness required for the work. No external evidence means freedom from the ongoing management process that has consumed a portion of every working woman's daily operational capacity for the entire history of women doing work outside the home. The magazine with the word menstruation in the headline was important. The basket at Walgreens was important. The third break and the hot water tap were important. The word in the pamphlet, the educational campaign, the horizontal network maintained and transmitting for centuries, all of it important. This is different. This is a different principle. You read that Earl Haas has applied for the patent and is looking for a buyer for the concept and hasn't found one, because the buyers he has approached have determined that there is no market for this, that women will not want this, that the concept is medically unsound or socially unacceptable or simply not something women will seek out. You set the trade journal down very carefully. The buyers have determined that there is no market. The buyers are wrong. The buyers are wrong in the specific way that people are wrong when they don't experience the problem, when they have never stood in a factory bathroom with 10 minutes to manage something that requires 11, when they have never calculated the bathroom break intervals, when they have never had a job that required standing in one place for hours while managing, invisibly, a biological reality that the workplace was not designed to accommodate. The buyers are wrong because they are asking, would women want this? And they are answering that question from the outside of the problem, from the position of people who do not have the problem. The answer from inside the problem is yes, of course, obviously, with an intensity of affirmation that you cannot communicate in the language of the trade journal, because the trade journal does not have the language for it. You write a letter to Earl Haas. You write it on the Women's Trade Union League letterhead. You thank him for the invention and tell him, in terms you spend 2 evenings calibrating, why the product is significant and why the existing buyers are wrong about the market and what the market actually is, which is every woman of working age in the country, and why the resistance to the product is not about the product, but about the same social architecture that produced the basket at Walgreens, the 10-minute break schedule, the bathroom 2 floors down in the house in Cleveland. You don't know if he reads it, you don't know if it matters. You know that in 1936 a company called Tampax, Incorporated, begins the commercial manufacture and distribution of a product called Tampax, which is a catchy and entirely unmistakable name for Earl Haas's invention, and you know that the women who built that company include a woman named Gertrude Tendrich, who purchased the patent rights from Haas and manufactured the first batch herself on a sewing machine, who did this because she understood, from the inside of the problem, what the buyers didn't. You know that by 1940 it's selling, not to everyone, not easily. The social resistance doesn't evaporate in the face of utility. Social resistance is more durable than that. It absorbs evidence of utility and continues on its structural course, but it's selling. The educational campaign is deployed again, the nurse's pamphlet again, the careful language, the trade journal language, the magazine headline, the basket, but now for a different product, a different white box, a different category of thing that cannot be named in the transaction that purchases it, but can be taken from the shelf and placed in the shopping bag, and taken home in the plain brown Walgreens bag where it becomes the private thing, the managed thing, the essential invisible thing. You're 39 years old. This arithmetic surprises you when you do it. 39. You arrived in Chicago at 20 with $11.70 and a letter from your minister. You have been in Chicago for 19 years. You have lived in Mrs. Kowalski's boarding house for 4 of them, and 3 other places after, incrementally better, incrementally your own, until you are now in an apartment on West Jackson, 2 rooms, which is yours in the sense that your name is on the lease and the furniture is yours and the mail comes addressed to Eleanor Marsh and no one else. You are not married. This is, in 1938, a category that still requires occasional explanation or apology in social situations, and you make neither, which is its own kind of statement. The Women's Trade Union League office is still on West Madison, though in different rooms now, better rooms, with more staff. Hannah retired in 1934, which she did with the reluctance of someone physically compelled to stop by a body that had finally run out of capacity to continue. And she handed the office to you with the same gesture Agnes used to give you information at the machine, which is to say she made it appear to be nothing and it was everything. You run the office. You run it with the 2 languages still operative simultaneously, the vertical and the horizontal, the testimony and the network, and you have found over the years that the translation between them is your specific and irreplaceable skill, the thing you can do that a lawyer can't do, or a politician can't do, or a physician writing about women's health can't do, which is to know both the inside and the outside of the problem, and to speak each language fluently to the people who speak it. The cases the office works are different in 1938 than they were in 1927. The New Deal has changed some things, not enough things, not as many things as it promised, and not all the things it appeared to change are as changed as they appear. But the labour standards have moved. The workplace inspection apparatus has more teeth. The women's health provisions in the legislation that has passed are, if not adequate, not nothing. They are not nothing. And in the pharmaceutical and personal hygiene industry, which you have been watching since 1919 because you have been watching everything since 1919, things are different in ways that are difficult to summarize in a sentence. The advertisements are direct now, not completely direct. Not in the way that future decades will be direct, where the television commercial will use the blue liquid demonstration and the magazine spread will have the woman in the white dress on the beach. Not that direct. But direct in the sense that there is a Tampax advertisement in the Ladies' Home Journal in 1938 that uses the word menstruation in the first sentence of the body copy. Not the headline, not in 1938, but the first sentence, not buried. Not the carefully excavated small type reference of 1921, the first sentence. 17 years from the first print of the word in the back pages to the first sentence of the body copy, you clip the advertisement. You add it to the file that you have been keeping since the nurse in the white uniform. The file is thick now. It is a record of 17 years of words arriving in print, of language catching up to reality sentence by sentence, of the social grammar shifting in the way that grammars shift, which is with the pace of geological change observed by a person standing inside it. You look at the file sometimes, not often, but sometimes. You look at the progression of it, what got printed in what year, what got named when, where the basket appears and where the basket is replaced by something else, the nurse's pamphlet, the educational campaign, the word, the headline, the first sentence in the body copy. Things are moving. The world is about to enter a war, which you can feel in 1938 in the way that people feel large thing approaching, through the newspapers and the radio and the quality of certain conversations and the specific kind of anxiety that sits in the faces of people who remember 1917 and don't want to be right. The war will do what the First War did, which is put women in positions of industrial necessity that their bodies had not previously been allowed to occupy officially, and the bodies in those positions will continue to have the requirements they have always had, and the necessity will drive solutions in the way that necessity drives solutions, which is pragmatically and without ceremony. You know this because you know history now, the history of this specific thing, which you have been accumulating for 19 years. You know that the First War gave you cellar cotton and nurse's discovery and Kotex and the basket at the Walgreens. You know what the logic is and how it runs. The war creates necessity. The necessity creates access. The access creates a new baseline. The new baseline survives the war. The new baseline always survives. Everything that women have gained access to, in the language of their own physical management, has become the new floor once it was gained. There is no going back to before the word was printed. There is no returning to before Kotex was on the shelf. There is no unmaking the educational pamphlet or the basket or the trade journal coverage of Earl Haas's patent. Once the word is in print, it is in print. Once the product is on the shelf knows what it holds. These are small facts, and they are permanent facts. You are 39 years old, and you have 19 years of small permanent facts accumulated. 19 years of watching what can't be unsaid accumulate into what can be said, what can be bought, what can be managed, what can be named. You are tired in the way of someone who's been doing something important for a long time. Not the tiredness that wants to stop. The tiredness that wants to rest and then continue. On an October evening in 1938, you walk home from the office through the streets of a Chicago that is not the Chicago you arrived in, though the EL is still the L and the stockyards are still the stockyards, and certain corners are still the corners they were when you navigated them with a cotton batting package from Mr. Greer's pharmacy tucked under your arm, and a calculation about the afternoon break running in the back of your mind. The streets know you. You have walked them enough that they carry your name without speaking it. You stop at Walgreens on the way home. Not the same Walgreens, not South Wabash, but one near West Jackson. You need soap. You need aspirin. You buy both. And you stop, for a moment, at the shelf where the products are. Not in the corner anymore. Not on the low shelf, not to the right of the bandage rolls. On the shelf at eye level, between the first aid supplies and the vitamins, with a small printed card above them that says, without euphemism, in normal type, the purpose they serve. White boxes, blue boxes, products with women's names and clinical names and the now standard vocabulary that has become in 20 years the vocabulary that these products are sold in, publicly, without baskets, without the arrangement of mutual fiction, with the ordinary directness of commerce. You look at them for a moment, the shelf, the products, the printed card above them saying what they are. 20 years. You buy your soap, you buy your aspirin, you walk home. The apartment on West Jackson is warm, the radiator having decided tonight to do its job without complaint. You make tea. You sit at the small desk by the window and you open the file and you look at the progression of it. From the nurse in the white uniform to the word in small type in 1921 to the printed card above the shelf, at eye level at the Walgreens near West Jackson, in October 1938. The file contains evidence of change that could not be seen from inside any single moment of its happening. The change is only visible in the accumulation. You know you're inside another accumulation. Something is building that you can feel but not see whole. The war that is coming will change things, the way the first war changed things, the way all the things that change things, which is not by design but by the collision of necessity and the built environment of social possibility. Things will be different. The things that are different tonight from what they were in November 1919, when you stood on the sidewalk on South Wabash with the white box in your shopping bag and felt the thing that is more complicated than relief and not quite triumph, are the words that can be said and where they can be said and by whom and to what audience and in what size type. The things that can be purchased and where and how and at what price and with what intermediate steps of social management required. The systems are different. The thing that is not different, the thing that was never different, is the horizontal network. The women talking to each other in the bathroom in the 30 seconds between the machine and the shift. The hook. The knowledge that goes sideways, woman to woman, in the language that doesn't require a magazine or a trade journal or a word in print. Helen Park carried the little washboard from home. Agnes put the thing on the hook. You told Margaret in the back room at Mrs. Kowalski's where the counter was and what to put in the basket. You told Maria Szymanski with gestures because the words weren't shared yet. You told Jessie Calhoun in the register that says I am not embarrassed by this information and neither are you. This is the chain of it. The horizontal chain that runs alongside the vertical one that is sometimes more reliable and sometimes less visible and always there, always moving, always transmitting what needs to be transmitted in whatever channel is available. You are part of this chain. Every woman reading this magazine advertisement, and every woman who put a coin in the basket, and every nurse overseas who looked at a wound dressing and thought, also this. All of them part of the chain. All of them one link of a thing that has been moving for longer than any of them have been alive. You close the file, you turn off the desk lamp. The apartment is the quiet of a city apartment at 11 at night, which is not silence but the specific reduction of a city's noise to its nighttime register, the L less frequent, the street sounds intermittent, the radiator's occasional conversation with itself. You are tired. You are warm enough and fed enough and safe enough, which are the three calculations that run continuously beneath all the other calculations, the floor below the floor, the number that tells you everything is functionally all right, and you can let the day go. You let the day go. You move to the bedroom in the dark without a lamp because you know this apartment in the dark the way you know the 9 blocks in the dark, the way you know everything you've walked through enough times to have it in the body rather than the mind. You prepare for sleep with the efficiency of 20 years of doing this, the specific economy of motion that serves you when you're tired, no movement wasted, the minimum necessary, the body knowing its own requirements. The bed is the one piece of furniture you spent real money on 4 years ago, because you had decided that the body which had been carrying you for 35 years through factory floors and L platforms and the 9 blocks and the steep stairs of the West Madison office, deserved, at the end of each day, a surface that was serious about rest. The bed is serious about rest. You lie down. The city breathes outside the window. Think about all the women in all the rooms in Chicago tonight. The new ones. The girls who arrived in August from somewhere else with their $11 and their reference letters. The ones who've been here 20 years like you, who know the streets in their bones. The ones in the domestic service apartments of the North Shore houses. The ones in the factory neighbourhoods of the South Side. The ones in the garment districts. The ones at the switchboard. The ones running the offices that have, in 20 years, slowly expanded to accommodate them. All of them managing the thing that is managed in silence. All of them navigating the built environment, which is better than it was and not yet what it needs to be, and moving, always moving, incrementally and persistently, and in the shape of words getting printed and products getting shelved and breaks getting added and tap water getting warm. The horizontal network, running underneath all of it, always running, transmitting what needs to be transmitted. The hook, the basket, the 30-second exchange, the pamphlet, the file, the little washboard, carried from home. Think about the women who did this before you. Your mother, who knew what she knew and gave you what she had in 30 seconds. Her mother, who gave her less in fewer words. Her mother before that, all the way back through every generation that managed this without a name for it, without a product for it, without a word in print or a shelf at eye level, or an advertisement with the word in the first sentence of the body copy. All of them got through. All of them found the system that was available in their specific time and place and got through their days with it. All of them passed something forward, whether they knew they were passing it forward or not. The 30 seconds, the tin box, the washboard, the hook, the knowing look across the sink. They gave you what they had. You give forward what you have. That's the chain. That's all it is. The chain of women who figured out what was available and used it and passed it along. And the chain is long, longer than any of them could see from inside their moment of it. Longer than the history books recorded, because the history books were not recording this. And it runs from the beginning of the thing being a thing to this room on West Jackson in October 1938, and continues past you into everything that hasn't happened yet. You are one link. You are enough. The radiator makes its sound, the L distant in its rhythm. The dark behind the curtains is the good dark, the dark of rest. Let the cases wait. Let the file close. Let the words that need to be printed wait for their year and their magazine. Let the shelf at eye level and the printed card and the basket and the pamphlet and the educational campaign and the word in the headline and the word in the first sentence of the body copy all wait where they are, on the shelves of the record. Let your hands be still. They have done enough today. Let the calculations stop. The arithmetic has been done. The numbers will be there in the morning. Let Agnes be at her machine. Let Dorothy be at her column of figures. Let Mabel Hooper be reading the grain of a bolt of cloth in a room with good light. Let Frances be at her switchboard, managing the connection between voices that can't reach each other without her. Let the new girl whose name you haven't learned yet be finding the hook for the first time. Let all of them rest. Let the chain rest. It'll be there in the morning. It's always there in the morning. The thing that is passed from woman to woman in 30 seconds at the bathroom sink, in the look across the room, in the file of clipped advertisements and trade journal pages and letters from Francis with pencil marks in the margins, in everything that has been said and said again. and will be said in words that are more direct each decade, more clear, more public, more printed. It's moving, even when you can't see it, even when the economy crashes and the budget cuts and the products go back to the shelf because they cost more than the week's coal for the front room. Even then, especially then, let the city breathe. It knows how. It has been breathing longer than you have been in it, and it will breathe longer after you're gone, and the women in it will keep doing what women have always done in cities, which is find the system that works and use it, and improve it, and pass it along. The lights of the L are visible through the curtains when it passes, orange and moving and then gone, there, gone. There again, different train, same track, the rhythm of it that you absorbed into your body 4 years ago, and that now is so much part of the background of your existence that you only notice it in the specific way. You notice your own heartbeat, which is when you stop and pay attention, which is now, which is tonight, which is the last useful attention your mind has for the day before it releases into the other thing, the sleep, deep and merited and warm. You're 39 years old, and you have been carrying things for 19 years, and you will carry them for many years more, but tonight you set them down. They'll be there in the morning. Right now, there is only the dark and the warm, and the breathing of the city and the slow relinquishing of consciousness into rest. The chain continues. You rest. You've earned it. The L, one more time, out there in the dark Chicago night. The sound of it moving through the city where you've been living your one life, one block at a time, 1 minute added to the break, one word at a time in the magazine, one coin in the basket, one thing left on the hook. Small things, permanent things, the same, and not the same, always both. Let sleep take you the way sleep takes you when you have truly used the day. The way it took Eleanor Marsh in the attic room on South Halstead in her first winter in Chicago, 19 years old, 3 cloths and 9 blocks, and the cautious hope of someone who has just figured out the direction of the current, even if she can't see where it's going. She couldn't see where it was going, but she moved with it. Let your thoughts slow and soften, and finally stop. Centuries from now, this room will not exist. This building, these streets, this L-track rattling through the Chicago night, these will all be other things. The stockyards will close. The lake will stay the lake. But women will still be in cities, still going to work, still managing the basic requirements of their bodies in built environments, and those built environments will be different from this one, not because the architecture changed by itself, but because the chain kept moving, the words kept being printed, the network kept transmitting, the small permanent facts kept accumulating, and some of them, some night in, some future you can't imagine from here, will lie down in whatever that place is and feel what you feel right now, which is this: tired enough, safe enough, part of something large enough, having done what needed doing with what was available to do it with. And they'll let the day go, the same way you're letting it go now. Because some things are the same. The need for rest, the warmth of a bed earned, the quiet at the end of a long day, that doesn't change. Good night.